Hi, Shir, Gal, Lee, Uri, Mazal Tov. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
It's so great we're having you here. So let's start with the first question. Where are you coming from, Shir?
I'm from Los Angeles, New Delhi.
I live in Hoboken, New Jersey, but right now I'm in Israel.
I live in Seattle.
Do you miss school?
Yes, I miss school because I miss my friends and miss playing with them and working with them.
What do you miss the most?
My friends, and we were going to have a field trip to Olympia, but it got canceled.
I miss school because I love hanging out with my friends and my teachers. It's really nice.
What do you think about Zoom? Do you like Zoom?
I'm okay with being with Zoom, but I would rather like school, real school.
When I study from home, it's easier for me to focus because there's no background noises of other people talking, and I can get work done faster.
Thank you.
I don't really
any
like
message
Zoom
that you
because,
could tell them?
well, in real life you can't see your friends.
Not really, because like the teachers glitch out a lot. You can't hear them well.
And if you had to say one thing to your teacher right now, what would you tell your teachers?
I would say have a great summer or something.
I would say I really appreciate your hard work and thank you for being amazing. And thank you for working very hard.
I would say, well, since I just finished first grade, so I'm going into second, so I would say I'll miss her. Have a great summer. I hope I will see you, and I miss you.
You're amazing, really. It's so great to see the four of you and to listen to you and to learn from you. And enjoy your summer. I hope very soon you'll go back to the classrooms as soon as possible. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Thank you everyone for joining us for the second day of the summit, and by the looks of it, it's going to be another amazing day. First of all, thank for all the kids who participate in the clip before us. It's always great to see the next generation. And ahead of us is another very interesting day, I believe, from neuroscience to social change to higher ed to data-driven education. So many panels to choose from. I have with me Professor Ariel Porat, the president of Tel Aviv University, and he's going to join us later in the higher education panel. But before we do that, we would like to introduce Professor Michael Crow, the president of Arizona State University. Professor Ariel Porat, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yuval, for opening the second day of this wonderful summit. I look forward to another very interesting day ahead of us. I will be part of the next panel, as Yuval just mentioned. But before that, I am honored to introduce the president of Arizona State University, Professor Michael Crow. Professor Crow is an educator, knowledge enterprise architect, science and technology policy scholar, and higher education leader. He became the 16th president of Arizona State University in 2002, and has led Arizona State University rapid and groundbreaking transformative evolution into one of the world's best public metropolitan research universities. As a model of the new American university, Arizona State University simultaneously demonstrates comprehensive excellence, ethnic and socioeconomic diversity, and consequential societal impact in the United States and, in fact, worldwide. I want to thank Professor Crow for taking part in this summit held by Tel Aviv University and IAC. It is a great honor and a privilege to learn from one of the best experts in the world how innovative teaching and learning should look like. Professor Crow, we cannot wait to hear your insights and recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, President Porat, for your introduction, and hello, President Crow.
Hello, Yuval. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. First of all, thank you so much for agreeing to be a keynote speaker at our summit. And I must start with a confession. I've been attending the ASU GSV Summit for many years and was always too embarrassed to ask for your autograph on your book that I'm holding. But now, when I got so lucky to interview you in one-on-one format, I can't still ask for it. So I guess online can't solve everything.
Yeah, but Yuval, that's book one. This is book two. So that's the book of why build a new American university. This is the book of what to build. So I've signed this one for you, and I'm sending it through the internet for you. So there you have it. So
thank you so much. We just broke the internet.
Yes.
So without further ado, there are so many questions I want to ask you, but I chose a few because of the limitation of the time. So the first question that came to my mind is the fact that historically the academic world has not been designed to adapt for a constant change. We're not agile startup. However, the new normal from COVID-19 to climate change and social change doesn't allow for constancy. As a leader of an educational institution, what is your approach for dealing with rapid and significant strategy change?
So Yuval, you're right. Our institutions of higher education are built on historical models where they're resistant to change, probably for what were good historical reasons, which was basically all of the kinds of social upheavals that universities had to survive. Now it's a different world, and now it's time for universities to take the lead at social scale, not to educate a few people, but to educate many people, not to educate and produce new ideas for just a few people, but for everybody. Now, to do that then means that culture has to be altered. Not everywhere, not every academic institution, but some. And that is that they have to find a way to embrace innovation on an ongoing and constant basis. To do that, they have to change the culture for the purpose of the university. That is, they need a broader social purpose. And to do that, they must ultimately embrace technology, or they've got no mechanisms to scale. And those are the three things that are at the root of what needs to be done in terms of building adaptive higher education institutions.
Well, sounds like great three foundations. And in a way, it leads me to my second question that, okay, let's say that we have those three foundations, although from my knowledge of higher education institution, it's very hard to transform organizational culture. But for the last 100 years, we at higher education knew what to do on September 1st or October 1st here in Israel. Today, 2 months before the traditional start of the fall semester, I wonder, do you know what the fall semester will look like in your institution?
Well, here's what we know. We know we're a 24/7 institution. We know we're going to provide educational learning and discovery services no matter what. We understand that there is a biological hurricane, COVID, around us. We know that the storm is taking on different manifestations in different parts of the world, particularly the United States, Brazil, and other places. So we know there's lots of uncertainty. So all we have to do is we have to adjust to the uncertainty. So what we've done in the last few months is we've birthed a third way of teaching and learning. So we have ASU full immersion on campus technology enhanced learning, call that Realm 1. We have Realm 2, which is ASU digital immersion online learning, which is asynchronous. And then since the beginning of March, we've built Realm 1.5, which is ASU full immersion synchronous technology enhanced learning. So we're spending millions of dollars right now to make certain that all of our 1,000 classrooms and all 75,000 of our on-campus students, if they can't be in the classroom, they can beam into the classroom. If the faculty member can't be in the classroom, she can beam into the classroom. If you have to have smaller classes or rotating classes, whatever. So basically what we've decided is to build the capability that allows us to continue teaching, continue learning, continue innovating, no matter what. And that's the approach that we're taking. We have plans to reassemble for the fall semester, which for us starts in the middle of August. We have plans to have every technique possible to limit the spread of COVID. And if none of those work, then we'll go back to this combination of ASU synchronous, what we now call ASU sync, or ASU online, which is digital immersion. We have continued to invest in technologies, new tools, new mechanisms through all of this. In fact, we're working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Our teams are on this in every possible way, from our research teams to our learning teams, to our learning system design teams, to our faculty. Everybody's probably never worked harder in their entire lives.
I don't know if the same revolution is happening in Tel Aviv University, but many people have worked on doing that transition. But it kind of leads me to the next question that you, in a way, started to answer. I understand that you invest so much on this new technology, but can you give me an example of one thing that is new, out of the ordinary, that you might be doing in the...
By the end of the fall semester, we'll be launching a full avatar-driven virtual reality enhanced learning experience with a company in California, where the student in a biology curriculum will travel in a virtual reality avatar framework to an alien zoo with alien species, and then we'll use that format as a way to teach biology, particularly evolutionary biology. We will then tie that virtual reality format into what we call our BioSpine curriculum. We now have 12 courses, 36 undergraduate hours of biology, all tied together in an adaptive learning platform. So we're excited about that. So those are two new things that we're doing that will be ready by the end of the fall semester. And we're, in the American phrase, Katie bar the door, means nothing is being held back from making this happen. Technology partnerships, technology licenses, creativity, unbelievable team organization, new capital construction, all underway right now to be ready to launch this whole new way of learning that we think is better than anything from before. It's just being accelerated because of COVID.
That sounds so interesting. It almost makes me want to start biology all over again. So maybe we can end in a more philosophical question, or a question that's related to your newest book that I now received and I'll have a chance to read. But from what I understand, you write a lot about public research university, and your newest book is titled The Fifth Wave, The Evolution of American Higher Education.
Right.
Why is new higher education model necessary? What do you believe is the role of public research university during times of chaos and uncertainty?
Well, here's the sad thing. So in the United States, we had a revolution against the British 250 years ago, give or take, and it was to overthrow the notion that the family that you were born in would be the determinant of your life outcome, meaning elitism and elitist institutions. So many universities have become, because of scarcity of resources, because we haven't built, many more universities, they've become increasingly narrow, taking only higher and higher and higher qualified students, leaving behind many completely qualified students, leaving behind students even a way to earn their way into the university. So the modern research university is not a replacement for the existing research university, it's an add-on. So it would be ASU or Tel Aviv University basically deciding to scale and using technology to scale, using technology to reach learners not able to come to the university. Like I know you all are doing and we're doing, creating pathways to the university where you earn your way into the university using technologically based learning opportunities. And so the notion of these universities, these new American universities or new Israeli universities or new research universities, is to basically operate at social scale, enhancing social outcomes with a research-driven faculty. Now that's extremely difficult to pull off in the same institution, and that's what we figured out how to do here because we've built purpose. Our purpose is broader than the goal attainment of the individual faculty member, and it's broader than creating only a highly selective university.
That's amazing, and I see how organizational or change in organizational culture is so important and part of your vision, and and that's amazing. Professor Crow, it's being enlightening, and thank you so much for participating and finding time.
You all, look forward to working with you all, and look forward to interacting with anybody that's in the audience. If we can get new things going, let's innovate together. So.
Thank you. We will definitely do that. And now we'll start the panel of higher education with our extremely talented guests. Thank you, Professor Michael Crow. Hi, dear panelists. We're live, opening the second day of the summit with so many viewers. So thank you so much for joining me. I just finished the conversation with Professor Crow. Still need to digest all the insights that I heard. But before I do that, I would like to introduce you. So just a few words. Professor Ariel Porat, the president of Tel Aviv University, the largest and most interdisciplinary Israeli university, and is the president since 2019. Professor Porat specializes in torts, contracts, and economical analysis of the law, and has been a visiting professor in the University of Chicago for 15 years, NYU, and more. Professor Catherine E. Fleming has been the provost of New York University, the largest private university in the United States, since 2016, and Professor Catherine specializes in modern history of Greece and the broader Mediterranean context, and maybe she can share about ancient plagues and how they dealt with it in the past, if we have time. And Mr. Ben Nelson is the founder and CEO of Minerva Project, a company whose goal is to provide an Ivy League education at the fraction of a price, and he's been doing it since 2011. And I am, as some of you know, Yuval Schreibman, the founder and CEO of Tel Aviv University, Tel Aviv Online since 2013, and the Summit co-founder. Dear panelists, hello, and welcome to the first panel of the second day. I would like to let you know that I've prepared, I believe, great questions, but I have a secret intentions. After all those questions, I will try to convince you that once, hopefully, COVID-19 will end, universities, and especially elite universities, will go back to teach in an in-person manner like they did before, because as you saw in the interview that I did with Michael Crow, I personally believe that organizational culture is the strongest power in the world, and it can defeat anything else. Ben Nelson, you can pay me later because I believe these are your opinions and I just expressed them. But I will start slowly, and then I will convince you because we have about 20 minutes. So I told you my hidden agenda. So maybe let's start with the same question more or less that I asked Michael Crow. Most of us are part of conservative organization, universities, and we are not adjust to regular changes. But now, because of COVID-19, social change, climate change, it seems like you always have to lead or create a strategy of how to adapt to constant change. How do you deal with it as leaders of your institution? And Professor Fleming, is it okay if you'll start with your answer?
Sure, absolutely. Well, I have to confess that academics aren't renowned for being great, speedy decision makers, and the experience over the past 3 months has changed that in really significant ways. To address the kind of provocative claim that we're all going to just go back to doing what we used to do after this, I think you're half right. I think that we are going to go back to doing what we were doing before, but we're also at the same time going to continue doing, and I hope continue to get better at doing, a number of the things that we've had to start doing as a result of this crisis. Many of them we were tiptoeing into at the typical academic pace before this. That pace has now been really sped up. So I think, as Professor Crow said, the real issue is going to be scalability, and how is it going to be possible for elite universities to continue to fulfill an in-person mission, but at the same time to recognize that there are lots and lots of people who can't have access in that format and should have access, and that we have an obligation to them as well. And I think that that's going to be met by implementing some of the things that we had to decide on really quickly over the past 3-4 months.
Okay, I might go back to part of your answer. Professor Porat, how do you see it from Tel Aviv University perspective, from your perspective?
Well, I think it's how to provide the formula, how exactly you adapt to, to changes like the one that we experience now. So I can just tell you that when the COVID-19 pandemic broke out, we were forced to switch in 48 hours from physical studying at the campus to distant learning. So technically, it was a really huge success, but at the same time, we are very well aware that this is not enough, and we also need to add the pedagogical parts to these classes, maybe in the future to provide hybrid classes and so on. So this is one thing. I think that as to Tel Aviv University, so at the university, we have many international programs. And this is a real challenge that we are preparing how to face in the next few months. So you know that there are thousands of international students coming every year to Tel Aviv University. And they come because of, first of all, I believe the quality of the studies here, but also because they want to come to Israel, to come to Tel Aviv, to stay here for a while. Now, we all know that the second part of namely to be in Israel, might be problematic. We believe in the hope that maybe they would be able to come, but it's not up to us, it's not depends on us. So now what we try to do is to offer them the option either to come physically in full or in part, but also to take part of the classes from their homes. And I think that maybe the most important thing is that now, when we know that we might not be able to offer them Israel or Tel Aviv, because as I said, it's not only up to us, we need to be more focused on offering courses and programs in areas in which we are especially strong about, like artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, Middle East studies, and Jewish studies, and law and economics, and some other fields. So we should be very focused in our efforts to attract students, even if they know that they won't be able to come physically to Israel or Tel Aviv.
Thank you, Professor Porat. Ben, what are your insights? And can you maybe just share in one, even though I think everybody knows you, at least in my world, maybe not everybody know what Minerva is really about. So just like share with us what is it about, and then your insights.
Sure. So Minerva is a reinvented conception of what higher education should be all about. Shifting effectively from a focus on transmission of knowledge to application and wisdom. And the traditional higher education system, President Crow was talking about the desire 250 years ago for the American Revolution to throw off the yoke of elitism. The other thing that the revolution was trying to throw off is the concept of being subjects and being free. And the subjectification of human beings was all about training them into a profession to serve the king, as opposed to teach them how to be wise so they can be free and citizens in a participatory representative republic or democracy. And that's what universities in the United States or in the American model were supposed to be teaching. It's the model of life that we all live in, but unfortunately, universities today are very much like the universities were at the time of the American Revolution and before. And I think probably the easiest way to think about this is that people look at universities as resilient institutions. They'll say, oh my God, universities have been around for 1,000 years. They'll be around forever. Well, I believe Professor Fleming can tell people about what you see when you do excavations of cities around the Middle East. In fact, you can look at the way cities were constructed up until a couple of hundred years ago. You had walls surrounding the city, big walls, people patrolling those walls, people keeping out, and the whole concept of what you needed to build to be a resilient city for thousands of years, much longer than universities have been around, were with this kind of physical protection, because that's how things worked. Well, with the invention of modern warfare, airplanes, of global trade, all of a sudden, the concept of having walls around a city didn't make any sense anymore. And cities transformed how it is that they not only protected themselves, but also just thought about their participation in the world. Universities now need to understand that rigid structure that they're connected to, both the physical infrastructure, but also the departmental structure, is an artifact of the past. What has made universities resilient over the first 950 years of their existence is not working in the modern day world, and it won't work at all in the future. But Yuval, as you said, I don't think universities will realize that until, unfortunately, it's too late.
Thank you, Ben, for making a bold statement. I have another question to Catherine, but I have a sense that she wants to relate to what you just said. So, Catherine, before the question, what do you think of what Ben said?
Well, I'll relate in two ways. First, by disappointing you both. I'm a modernist. I'm not a classicist. The fact that someone works on Greece doesn't automatically make them a classicist. But what I can speak to is something that I think both Tel Aviv University and NYU have in common, which is that we are both fairly young universities and we're both urban universities, and we're intimately connected to the cities of which we're a part and intimately connected to the so-called real world. And that is in very strong distinction to lots of the institutions that are being alluded to when we talk about sort of, the fortress city, the walled off institution, the so-called cloister. So I would like to say, just on behalf of TAU and NYU, that I think we do have that as an advantage that works for us in terms of being able to be nimble and adaptable. We were created under quite different circumstances than were many of the institutions that are sort of lurking in the background of this conversation.
I think it's a great answer, Ben. Maybe you will share later on. But Catherine, let me use that to a follow-up question. When you started your conversation, I was thinking in my head, do you know how September 1st or October 1st is going to look like in your institution? I kind of imagine winter is coming, as you say in Game of Thrones, because we have so many insights that we've learned in the past 4 months, but it's very hard to implement them within 2 months. And students are coming, winter is coming, fall semester is coming. What are you going to do in your institution?
Right. Well, one thing that COVID-19 has taught all of us is that we may think we have a really good idea of what the future is going to look like. And in fact, that is a complete illusion, no matter what world you inhabit. We don't know for sure what the fall is going to look like, but we do know for sure that we're going to try and be prepared for any possible contingency, whether it is one that's imposed on us by the virus, by our governor, by the president of the United States, by the market, or by any one of a number of other factors. We're going to have to be prepared to do synchronous teaching, asynchronous teaching, hybrid teaching. There are going to be a number of students who would like to be physically present who can't be for immigration reasons or for health reasons or for financial reasons. We want to accommodate them even if we are having in-person teaching as well. So I don't know exactly what it's going to look like in terms of the balance of those different components, But I do know that grosso modo, it's going to look like something that is a mix of those different components. And moreover, that's probably going to change over the course of the semester. The way things look at the beginning of September isn't necessarily how they're going to look at the end of November. We can hope that's a statement of optimism rather than one of pessimism. But again, we don't know, and we'll try and be prepared for whatever comes our way.
Thank you, Professor Fleming. Professor Porat, how do you see maybe the Israeli system or Tel Aviv University when October 1st here in Israel will come?
Well, I think that my answer is going to be very similar to the one Katie just provided you with. So I think that there are theoretically three options. One is that we will return to normalcy, and I believe the chances are not very high, still possible. The alternative would be that we wouldn't be able to teach physical teaching at all. I believe that probably the third option would be the available one in Tel Aviv, which is that we would have physical classes, but some classes would be physical, some others would be from distance, and there would be classes where some of the students would be physically present in class and others would stay at home. And maybe some professors would decline to teach in classes, although I don't expect that would be a real problem. I'm among those people who believe that we should try to find ways somehow to live with the coronavirus. And so if it was up to just about me, right, if I thought that all students and professors have the same spirit that I have with respect to this issue, I would make all possible efforts to return to classes. But I understand that this is not what's going to happen, even if the health authorities in Israel would say this is okay, you could, given that you keep social distance and so on and so forth, it's safe enough to study in class. I understand, and of course have a lot of empathy to those people, to those students that would subjectively feel threatened, and we must find ways to accommodate both students that want to study before and others that prefer, to stay at home. I think that one of the challenges that we haven't solved yet is about examinations. We still don't have satisfactory tools to allow exams from, in distance. There is the problem of honesty in exams, and unfortunately, in Israel, it is an issue. I've taught many times in American universities, and I can tell you that in the United States, I believe it's less problem. Students, once they commit not to cheat, they comply with they abide by their this norm of. For some reason in Israel, it's different. So this is a challenge that we haven't solved yet. I hope we will find solutions. We work very hard on that.
Thank you, Professor Porat. We have less than 2 minutes, so I will ask the last question, and if it's okay, Ben, I will start with you. What is the one element that will profoundly change in education and learning within the next few years? And I'll remind you that in the beginning, I told you that there are going to be no change. So less than 2 minutes, a round of answers. Ben, you go first.
Well, I don't think I think most universities won't change, but the big change will be that some will. And, we know what we're doing in the fall because it's going to be the same thing we've been doing for the last 6 years, which is delivering the best education on the planet because we don't put our students in a room with an offline instruction. We use data, we use integrated learning, we enable intellectual development of our students across subject matter, and that can only be done using technology. It just so happens that you can use that technology whether or not your students are in residence or not. And so as you'll see new models of learning come up, and we just announced a partnership with Paul Quinn College in Texas that will allow for a 3-year degree with 2 years of work experience with less than $7,500 out-of-pocket costs in total for the degree for Pell-eligible students to produce the best quality education in the world and none of it will be impacted by COVID. And so I think because you're going to have these new types of models emerging, all of the universities are just going to go back to normal, will all of a sudden see that their new normal doesn't work. And they're going to have to really rethink what that's going to be about. I don't know how long it'll take for them to realize that, but unfortunately, I don't think it's going to happen in the next year or two.
Okay, Ben, I have you on record. Professor Fleming, how do you feel about the same question?
Well, if we're talking about universities of the traditional sort in the United States, the big thing that's going to hit us is a major demographic shift in the country. Probably won't have a huge impact on elite universities other than to make them even more impossibly elite than they already are. But it'll have a very big impact on other institutions that aren't willing to try new approaches to delivering what it is that they're selling.
I agree with you. And Professor Porat, closing the panel, one last sentence on your thought on the issue.
Yeah, so I think that one thing is we'll have many more hybrid courses, partly physical, the other part in class. And the second thing is that we'll have much more multidisciplinary studies in order to equip students with tools for an uncertain world.
Okay, dear panelists, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I would like to continue forever, but we have more panels ahead of us and actually a lot of viewers in all the different platforms. I don't know if you're aware of it, but so many platforms. Thank you so much for your time and planning and everything, and hope to see you in person, if that's allowed to say, in an online summit.
In
Israel. I also like to travel sometime, but I understand I work for you, Porat, so if you will, one day. Thank you all.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
I'm a venture capitalist based in Jerusalem, also a social entrepreneur and business entrepreneur. We are starting a panel with Shira Ruderman, a philanthropist and social activist, and executive director of the Ruderman Foundation, and Adi Altshuler, who is a friend, and in my mind, one of Israel's rock stars when it comes to social change and social activism. The topic of our panel is education for social change. And I would like to start with Shira as we think about the education system today and what we're trying to disrupt fundamentally, how we can use education as an instrument of change.
So first, great being here with you all. And Adi is a dear friend for many years, and it's absolute pleasure. I would start by saying that part of, I think, the philosophy and the approach that we have towards education, that everything starts and ends with education. And today's education is not necessarily what we know as, knowledge based. It's more skills based. So the question is, how do we approach our systems, our physical space, our teachers, our approaches systematically together to enhance change and teach our generations to come, my kids included, to view education as fun place and fun experience and a meaning of fun that makes them curious. So is education is a tool for change? Absolutely. But it does not stand alone in what we experience in schools. It has to be a systematic and cultural approach to how we view schools, to how we view school and informal education, to how we view whatever happens in school connected to each other, meaning math and art are not disconnected in the impact of how kids come towards their experience of education. So for me, when I think about education, I think about it as, much more exciting and more meaningful and fulfilling experience. And I think about, I'll finish by saying that my elementary experience when I grew up in Israel, studied in Israel, was one of the most phenomenal things I remember, because it was clear to me that all the experience that I have from one class to another, between the interaction between the teacher and the students, is not isolated experiences. It's coming together. So the inclusive approach and diverse approach to education, in my mind, starts with how we see the role of education today in our life.
Thank you, Shira. Adi, I want to ask you to dream for a second. And I think as all entrepreneurs are agents of change and are dream catchers, I'd like you to share with us how you imagine if we were starting over again from scratch and redesigning the education system with a blank sheet of paper, how would you go about setting it all up for us?
Ellie, that's a very big question. And wow, okay. It's never a small one with you, huh? So if I can rebuild the education system all over again, what would I do?
With a blank sheet of paper, it's all yours.
Wow, okay. So, okay, I'll try. I see a system, or I see communities, actually. I mean, what is education? Education is everything, right? Everything is education. The way we think, the way we perceive life, the way we learn, the way we see ourselves, the way we believe in everything, our desire, everything is affected, impacted by education. So I see system where, first of all, it doesn't divide people based on a category or one element in their identity. Can be anything from, because today we separate. We say, okay, what is your age? Let's put you in a system where you find people like yourself, meaning yourself, you have the same age. You have disability, you are deaf. Okay, let's put you together with deaf people with hearing problems. Because you are the same people and you have the same needs, so you'll be in a special system. You are Orthodox, you're ultra-Orthodox, so let's go, let's put you in a ghetto with people like yourself, and we'll give you the best education. But it's so messed up, because the only way you've been perceived every day of your life is from perspective from only one part of who you are. I'm not just, I'm not a person with Down syndrome. It's not what I am. I could have Down syndrome, but it's, I'm smart, I'm funny, I'm stubborn, I love soccer, I love cooking, I have so many things. It's not just one thing. So if I can build again the system, it wouldn't be about, segregating people based on one element, saying that now, because as Sheila said, we want diversity. It's an asset. It's not a burden. The only way we can grow, we can be educated, is if we will be with people that are different from us. And we are different. That's reality. That's life. We don't want society that everybody are the same, that they need to kind of, beat some kind of diversity that they have in order to fit in. Every time that you hear the word despite, you are in the world of segregation. Despite the fact that I'm a woman, I'm a CEO. Despite the fact that I'm Ethiopian, I'm a pilot. Despite the fact that I'm on the autism spectrum, I can volunteer to the army. So if I can rebuild it again, it will be an inclusive system where diversity is a privilege and it's an opportunity. And then I think we can fix everything from there.
Thank you, Adi, and I'll share with everybody that you've started, that you're building a new school system here in Israel called Inclu and making some headway there. Shira, you've been at this for a while.
Actually, because of you, because of your support and everything you gave us.
Okay, none of that. Shira, I'm fairly new to kind of the activist in social change through education. I've been at it for 7 years. I think you've been at it for much longer. And, what I'd really like to know is, are we making an impact? Is this working? People always view the battleground of education as the opportunity to change the future, engage children while they're young, and make a difference. With your perspective, how do you think we're doing so far in this effort to really make social change?
So I would say that first, I'm an educator myself. So when I look at the question, I look at that with different hats. One is an educator, as a teacher, as a manager. One is a mother of 4 kids in the education system. And of course, as an activist and philanthropist that fund and support a lot of initiatives in this sphere. And I would like maybe to just say that one of the missing elements in how to answer this question is what audience we're looking at. Are we successful? By and large, we can say, yes, we are. Do we make an impact? Of course, you change one person. There's a phrase in the Bible that says you impacted one person, you changed the world. But I think that you and I and probably a few others, when we look at impact, we view it from a question of scale. We view it from a question of systematic change. We try to understand how we as philanthropists that are not responsible, in my view at least, to the public sector and to the solutions. We are partners in it. We have the privilege that maybe others don't have to create initiatives and bubbles of schools and maybe districts to see how pilots and ideas work at. But their responsibility at the end of the day to run the systematic change in a country or in a city is by the public sector.
Great.
So when I view it, and I'm thinking about what you said, like we fund 20 years. And sometimes I have moments that I say to myself, do we really make a change? Because changing one school, of course, it's amazing. It's important to impact maybe even 4,000 students in a country is outstanding. But we both know it's not everyone. It doesn't also mean that, we're making the change to be sustainable for the futures. And it doesn't even mean that others can be impacted by it because we're creating this bubble. So you asked Adi about her dream, and I can't take away her dream because we probably share a lot of the values. But my dream is that we will stop see education as initiatives, that we will stop seeing education as startup. Although, you come from the startup world, I invest in the startup world, but I see education as the fundamental platform for a good society. because this is where we teach our kids how to be good people, to be good citizens, how to think about a change, how to be advocates for a change. How can we create that if their experience on the public systematic change is not something that they, A, necessarily see the best practice, and B, is something that a lot of other kids like them in the same country or the same city experience.
Shira, I'm going to just jump in because we're going to run out of time. I'm going to go to the game show section of this panel. We're going to go rapid fire really quickly. So I want to think big here because that's what we're trying to do. We want to make big change. We want to disrupt something that we're unhappy about. I'd like you just very quickly, each of you, to think of one element which is profoundly going to change in the coming years in education. For me, at Pico Kids, it's all about creating a values-based framework. Shira, some of the stuff you addressed, to teach kids not only skills, but values, identity, and things that can fundamentally bind us towards a better future. Adi, you got 1 minute, 60 seconds, go.
So I think if it's about the system, and the minister and the CEO currently we're working on it, it's about, flexibility, autonomy, and trust in the system. And in terms of the content and the value, it's about creating a place and meaning for every student. So we can bring compassion to be the core essence of the communities.
I'm sitting in my office in Tel Aviv. There's a protest outside, which might be providing some call for action for social change. Shira, 60 seconds. What's the one big element that you think will change in the coming years?
I think that we experiencing during this COVID, few changes to come. The hybrid models, when we talk about being physical and reimagine experience virtually, I think that we have to uplift the positions of the teachers. We have to talk about excellency, meaning not to compromise about the quality, the diversity, the inclusion that we want to see, because it trickles down to how our kids growing up. So I think that it's excellency, it's reimagining, it's some passion. I think we have to bring the passion and the value base and the skill base back to our system.
Thank you. So we're in the game show section. So I'm going to talk about a $100 million prize. And it's a challenge I've given to Adi in the past. And Shira and I discussed beforehand. If I was writing a $100 million check right now and you could spend it, but you had to spend it right away to make a really big difference because we want to make change now. Adi, what would it be? What would you do with $100 million?
I refuse to answer this question.
Okay, I'll raise it to $1 billion. What would you do right now?
I'm a big failure when it comes to thinking, and about money. But I can tell you this. I think, this is really hard times, talking about the protest outside your window. People lost everything they had here and in other countries, of course. And, despair and feeling, all this stress. It's hard, and and education gives me hope because there are thousands of amazing people that are there. They are the teachers, they are the principals, they are the people that wake up every day, regardless of the money that they don't get money, and regardless of anything, just to try to fix and to help people in order to change this society and other societies. And I think rather than politics, education is the only way. So I think listening to people on field, that's the best way to go. And
thank you. Adi, you didn't spend any money I just gave you. Shira, what are you going to do with $100 million today?
I think it's a proof, Adi's answer, it's a proof to my mind that education is not just about money. You can spend $1 billion probably in a few minutes. I can make some decisions to spend $1 billion and it would not create a change. It's to redesign and to rebuild how we look at that. I also think it's fair to say that education is not necessarily a sustainable model. It's not that if you invest money, you solve the solution. It's constant new generations, new kids coming in. And the other thing I would say, where? Are we spending it in the public system in Israel or in the day schools in the Jewish communities around the world that probably most likely would never be sustainable models? So we really need to rethink how our education system looks like in the future to try to make it more impactful and meaningful experience, so it will, be a mirror to the values and the change that we want to see as a society.
Great. So we just have 1 minute, and with your permission, I'm just going to wrap up and say thank you, both of you. My view and the work I've been doing at Pico Kids is that everyone is equally underprivileged today when it comes to 21st century education. We really have to take our most creative thinkers, reimagine the system, and hopefully build a framework for a better future and a better outcome for everybody. So thank you very much, both of you, and looking forward to hearing your dreams.
And Ali, thank you for being such an amazing inspiration and such a big supporter, not for me and what we do, but for so many people, especially in Jerusalem, but all over the country.
Thank you, and thank you, Shira. Thank you, Adi. And I hope we can all catch our dreams and make a difference. So thank you.
Amen. Thank you.
Yuval, מה נשמע? How is the summit?
Hi, Sean. The summit is amazing. It's like a circus of edtech, circus of ideas. So many unbelievable panels and speakers. Really interesting. I've learned a lot. But we're here to not only talk about the summit and talk about our collaboration.
Right. We are action people, so let's take the theory into action. And really, during the crisis, the IIC launched OFEC Hub. And the idea of OFEC Hub was to make education accessible to anyone during the crisis and beyond, because we believe that this opportunity is something that we need to take with us for years to come. And we had more than 600 students already taking classes with OFEC. And then Yuval and I spoke and we said, okay, but we can bring now higher education from Israel, from the best of the best in topics that really teenagers care about, like computer science, like cyber, like the startup world, and bring it here to America. And this dream for the IIC to really connect Israel and America, Israel and the Jewish people now is getting another dimension. And I'm excited that the first strategic partner for OFEC is going to be Tel Aviv University. So thank you, Yuval, for the vision and for really working with us in such an amazing collaborative way.
Thank you, Sean, for making this happen so fast. Again, your execution of your organization is unbelievable. The flags of Tel Aviv University were always about diversity and accessibility, and really there's an amazing opportunity here. And I can't wait to start. So thank you again for this amazing initiative.
Thank you, and we have some more sessions, so let's go and learn some more. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
היי יואב, מה נשמע?
בסדר, שוהם. What?
Great to see you.
Good to speak with you, yes.
So we're living in a very challenging and complex reality, and the reason I'm very excited to have you to host here, Professor Yoav Shoam, this summit, is because his unique and really versatile experience from higher education to social change in K-12, entrepreneurship, artificial intelligence, both in America, both in Israel. Professor Shoam is a Professor Emeritus of Computer Science at Stanford University, is a leading AI expert, artificial intelligence experts that received several global awards in the field. He's also a serial entrepreneur and founded several AI companies. And I'll leave some other parts of the bio, if it's okay, for later on. So let's jump into the subject. So you are one of the pioneers to develop and host a MOOC, massive open online courses, offering basically higher education to the masses. That was a big premise. And this notion of MOOC, which was a big vision, also was criticized. But at the end of the day, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that you had a online game theory course, had close to 1 million students. So from your perspective, do you feel like MOOCs really fulfilled the original vision? What have we learned?
So, yeah, first of all, thanks again for having me. So I do think that MOOCs are not flash in the pan. There have been technologies in the past that sort of threatened to disrupt education, radio and what have you. I think this is different, but certainly you see significant impact. When I taught my first course, we had students from, I want to say, 120 countries, and it's really transformative. By now, as you mentioned, a lot of people kind of registered to the courses. I believe over 1 million now. I think only, quote unquote, 50,000 graduated. It's still more people than I ever saw at Stanford with my own eyes. So it's certainly transformative. Have they reached their potential? Absolutely not. I think that if you look, and I'll just speak from my own course, it's a disaster. It's very popular. It's one of the more popular ones, but I wouldn't do it the same way again. It's really like every medium. You take the old medium, and when people move from radio to television, it looks like televised radio. And that's how my course looks like online. It doesn't use the medium for what it's really uniquely good at. And that's a process it'll take, and the times we live in maybe will accelerate the process.
So one of the key issues with MOOCs, but in general in distance learning, is the social distance or the physical distance between the students. So, and we get this question a lot, the concern of both teachers and parents about the physical distancing and the fact that university is not only about learning, it's also about social interaction. Learning and social interaction within learning is a very important and key part. So how do you see it as a key part, and how do we solve this challenge?
So a very good point. One, first of all, really has to differentiate between, for example, online. I have 3 young kids who went through online education now during the pandemic. And it's a very different experience than what a post high school, whether it's a student or a lifelong learner process they go through. Obviously, in the case of young kids, the social interaction is not only a key component, maybe it's the key component. But let's focus maybe on post kind of, high school education. The social component is very important for a number of reasons. First of all, even if you look only at learning outcomes, social interaction is very important. It can be facilitated to a large extent with technology. It is being facilitated to a large degree with technology. But when you think about the role of, and let's be specific about the modern university, social interaction is important for other reasons as well. It forms lifelong bonds, whether professional or personal. It's a relationship with researchers in some universities, so exposure to research. And not all of that can be recreated, which means that one has to rethink this aggregated value proposition that kind of consolidated around the modern university, initially in sort of Germany and England, and now US kind of leading the charge there. And I think a number of people are thinking that there's a growing mismatch between the needs of modern technology and the structure of the modern university.
Many speak about AI today AI for the audience, artificial intelligence is the future basically of everything, right? And in terms of education, do you believe that AI will really make a dramatic change in education for years to come? And what are the key elements that we really will see a disruption in the way that we learn? Will it be really that personalized, really that adaptive? Does it really make us better students, better learners?
Right. So, so I have a horse in this race, not in AI for education, but in AI in general, and I'm very bullish on AI. I think there's often over promises, both in terms of what AI can deliver on, and also on how key it is for the problem that's being addressed. I think there's many places where algorithms, not all algorithms are AI, but algorithms can be used for personalization, for matching students, for a bunch of personalized learning pathways. Honestly, the algorithms required there are embarrassingly simple. So yeah, I think there's a role for algorithms, but the cutting edge AI, it can impact everything. This too, I don't think it's the game changer here. And more social engineering and institutional re-engineering would have much more impact than technology.
So talking about social engineering, many times for years we're hoping that technology will really shrink the gap in society. We look at COVID-19, in some ways it shrank, in some way it expanded the gap. Do you believe that technology really shrinks or expands the gap within society? And with that aspect also, if you can talk a little bit about WeCode and why you're part of it and why you invest your time as one of the founders there.
Yeah, so this is key, and this is the passion that I have. Look, I don't think technology in and of itself either widens or narrows the gap. I think it's how it's deployed and what you wrap around the technology. It is the case that if you take a fire and forget MOOC-like experience, say on Coursera, which is a wonderful platform, and that's where my course runs, it certainly is biased towards self-motivated, usually people who have a very solid basis, who want to expand their horizon, want to retrain, want to just expand, their skill set. And in that respect, if that's all you do, it has a danger of expanding gaps. It's not exactly right, because there are people who are not socioeconomically diverse, but geographically diverse. And sometimes those people just don't have access to that level of education, but do have the kind of personal, family, financial background to avail themselves. They are self-motivated. So in that respect, that's a flat world that the technology can't help kind of make a little smaller. But when you think about sort of socioeconomic gaps, there is a danger of the haves having more and the not haves having not more. You even saw it in early experiments in MOOCs in California, where students really needed hand-holding so they don't drop out or make the best use of the platform. That really motivated the project we started in Israel, which you alluded to, called WeCode. It's a very innovative model where it's a hybrid academic vocational kind of model where maybe step back for just a second. The old model of you study for whether it's 12 years or 16 or more, and then you go and work for IBM, and 30 years later you get your gold watch and retire in your RV. Those days are gone. People change jobs. I've seen various statistics. One of them is 8 times during their career. We know that in technology, and technology is becoming more and more a key component of the job kind of skills needed. Technology changes very rapidly. And so you really need to retrain. And so lifelong learning is not a phrase, it's reality. And on the other hand, there's an opportunity, because to engage with technology, you don't necessarily need a 4-year college process. Now, I do think that colleges play a very important role in a number of ways. We don't have time to go into it, but for certain segments of society, a briefer introduction to the academic and intellectual part, coupled with a vocational component, can allow them to engage in this work environment, to not have a glass ceiling because they've gotten a very narrow skill set that doesn't transfer, doesn't expand, and yet allows them very quickly, on the order of a year, to start work, in our case, as programmers. And by all means, the academic part they have will carry credit if and when they want to continue the degree. What was key for us, though, was to couple this program with a very strong support network. The people coming into the program come from very, very difficult background. They bring tears to your eyes when you hear about those. And it shows in the classroom, the people who don't know how to learn, missing very key components. And so what you need to do, especially early on, is really give them all those skills, 21st century skills, whether it's time management or self-confident role models, and it's transformative. You see that at the end of the first month, they've transformed into really a killer group who performs as well as students who do come from more standard backgrounds. And indeed, we've been able to place them in programming positions within 9 months. But it really calls for coupling the traditional kind of teaching. By the way, there we haven't used so far distance learning. As we expand, we definitely will. But whether it's distance or face-to-face, you absolutely need to couple it with handholding. And by the way, this is where Israel has a huge advantage. It's not only because it has great educational institutions and great technology, it's because it has those and it's small. And that allows us to really reach every corner in a very personal way.
So, this latest crisis really accelerated the use of distance learning, online learning, technologies. Many things that we've been trying to do for many years happened overnight, right? Because we were forced to do it. Do you see it as a blimp, as a temporary change, or a really paradigm shift, something that will stay with us for years to come? Will it have a real impact on education in the 21st century, or this is just a bump in the road?
So first of all, I don't know. People predict that the COVID impact in various areas will be lasting. For example, that the move for work from home will be sustained, and so on. I don't know. I think the chances are that if I had to bet, I would bet that yes, it will accelerate change. And the reason is there is something very inefficient in the education and training apparatus that we as a society developed and the way the world is in the 21st century. And when you have inefficiency, there's a lot of inertia and sometimes you're stuck in there for a while, but then you have some discontinuity, like, for example, perhaps the COVID, that nudges you to a different point of the space. And once you see that, there's sort of no going back. Now, I don't think it'll be that simple. I think that we won't get to the full, we won't realize the full potential of distance education that quickly. I've seen, certainly in the elementary school, lots of obstacles to overcome. But even, Technion moved within, 3 weeks to online education. There's a lot more work to be done to make it effective. But yeah, if I had to guess, I think probably we'll see durable impacts of this period.
So in 30 seconds, what is the one thing that you believe that will change in the upcoming years in education? What will be the one element that will make a difference?
So I'll tell you what I hope will be the difference. I hope that, and I'm a product of the traditional kind of degree scheme, from the master's to the PhD. I don't think they'll go away, but I hope we see those complemented with new certificates of relevance to the various professions that will be as highly regarded and highly coveted and meaningful. And I think that'll be in better harmony with what the world needs. And that's my hope. And I think there's a chance it'll happen. That's certainly what we at WeCode are trying to help achieve.
Thank you so much, Yoav. It's great to see you, and thank you for being here with us. And
thank you, and congratulations for the great first name.
For you, for the same for you for the family name.
Okay, bye. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. We're so happy to be here today. I have Erica Lockheimer, VP of Engineering and LinkedIn Learning. And before I'm going to hand it over to her for an introduction, I just wanted to introduce myself. So I joined LinkedIn Learning in 2016. I joined specifically to launch LinkedIn Learning, and that's because I believe LinkedIn is uniquely positioned to really change the landscape of learning. So we went ahead and we launched LinkedIn Learning. It was a successful launch. We established our vision, which was to empower every member of the global workforce to develop the skills they need so they can realize their opportunity. And that was the point where I met Erica. So Erica, I'm going to give it to you for an introduction.
Thank you, Mor. So hi, I'm Erica Lockheimer. I've been at LinkedIn in about a month. It'll be 10 years, so quite a while. I'm VP of Engineering for the LinkedIn Learning team. I've been doing that for the last 2 years, and then I headed the growth team for LinkedIn, where we were in a hyper growth, just growing the network and growing people on our economic graph. I've been in the industry for over 20 plus years, and my background is computer engineering, so I'm excited to be here.
Great. So I think this is such an interesting time to have a conversation about education, especially with COVID, because our workforce has now moved to a remote workforce. And I think, I think where we can start maybe is just sharing some of the trends you've seen, some of the things that we've learned on LinkedIn Learning. I think that will be a good starting point.
Yeah, great starting point. We have learned so much in this new climate. It is amazing to see that how hungry people are to learn in this moment. I mean, from March, April, and May, we've seen 2.4x the amount of hours learned. And that's equivalent to about 140% increase on hours. In May alone, if we were to compare how we were doing last year, we're at 5x the number of hours. People are just hungry to learn in this moment, and it's great that we're able to deliver those needs that they have. Another thing that we're also noticing is that people want to be more social when they're learning as well. So we've seen a tremendous amount in increase in joining our groups. It's up 600%. And then also where people can ask questions and answers on a course they just learned. So the social aspect in this distant learning aspect is really coming together, and we're able to provide that on our platform.
And you know what I love the fact that it's COVID and people are at home and they're isolated and they're seeking that social engagement. But social learning is not necessarily like a new concept for us, right?
Right. Yeah, it's not. I think about some of the ways that, I even learned throughout my career. I think I graduated from college 20 years ago. And I remember even when I came, out of school, it was during the .com days. So if you could put up a website, you were a genius. But I had just graduated from school. It was computer engineering, hardware and software. I didn't know how to put up a website. I had to learn in that moment. So there's always this gap where you're going to have to continue to learn and always be learning mentality. And I've learned that throughout my entire career. So yes, we're learning in this distant moment, we're learning in this new moment, but that's happened throughout my entire career. I remember in, the web movement, talk about the mobile movement. None of us went to school to do mobile development. And all of a sudden you had iOS, Android, and we had to now create our solutions on mobile devices. That was another moment where we had to learn. And then now you think in this new movement with AI, all of us are needing to either reskill or upskill in that moment. So it's real exciting to see, but it is not such a new concept, but it definitely has accelerated the need.
Yeah. And I think relevant for our audience, I think maybe this is not a known fact that a large portion of LinkedIn Learning accounts are actually higher ed. Mm-hmm. So we know that they are working with us to adapt and change. And I think it would be interesting to hear a little bit how LinkedIn Learning is working with these institutes and what's the goal, right? Because you just talked about how going to college and transitioning to becoming a learner. And we heard a lot in the summit. I heard a lot in different panels on preparing our student to join the workforce, right? So let's hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, there's definitely, I'd give you 2 examples. And it is, think about, we have one customer, Los Angeles Community College District. And that's a community college. The median age is about 24, 27 years old, where they're either going back to skill because they need to relearn or learn a new skill, or they're just starting off. And what we're finding is that we're now partnering with these community colleges because they need to add LinkedIn Learning. Because the difference is our platform, we have over 13,000 courses. We are producing 50 courses a week. This is cutting edge material, right? You have your curriculum, which is so important to make sure that we get that to the students, but you need to basically couple it with the cutting edge technology of what's happening to get our students ready to have their careers, make the things that they are going to school for actually happen. We also have another university, Seton Hall, where they're partnering with us from the very beginning of their 4-year college degree, where they're coupling, again, LinkedIn Learning. And you think about the courses that we have, the number of languages that we support over 6 languages. And it's really important to get these students ready, be career ready. And so if you couple that with LinkedIn Learning courses, they get certificates that they get to add to their profile. It makes them more marketable. It adds that little oomph that they need in their professional identity to get that job.
Yeah. I think it's so relevant, that transition that, finish classic education and now you're part of the workforce, but you cannot stop learning. You just can't, right? We've talked, again, this is something I heard in the summit. It really is about skills. And that's some of the things that we've heard when we did a case study with the LACCD, the Los Angeles Community College District, is that it is about skills. And that's really where LinkedIn Learning is trying to heavily lean. I know personally myself, when I immigrated from Israel, I had no idea what I was doing. And, I was very fortunate. I had good friends and good mentors, and they were the one who were like, okay, well, go online, go see what project management is. And that was over 10 years ago. And, it really built a career for me. So it's been the future. We know it's been the future for a long time. I think in general, we could talk a little bit about what we think is going to change, or really kind of the core question of what everyone are trying to answer is what is going to be that one element that really profoundly change in the next few years in education.
Yeah, I think right now, what is great is we have insights. Especially LinkedIn, we have this economic graph of people, jobs, and skills. And actually, just this past late June, we decided to partner with Microsoft and mind our economic graph to understand what are the top demanding jobs right now. So we found the top demanding jobs that people are trying to hire for right now, and then we're able to map them to skills. And then we have this other platform called LinkedIn Learning, where you can map those exact learning paths to those jobs. And we recently just made 10 learning paths for free to map to these jobs. And for example, you have program management, you have software developer. How can I become a software developer? We have listed about 10, 15 courses on how you can actually do that. So this is where people need to, again, potentially either reskill or upskill in this moment. I mean, I could talk to you personally, even my family members that I have right now, they are in a moment where they need to change their course of work. And she's at 49 years old, she owned her own business, for 25 years doing corporate events. Guess what? Social gathering is not a thing right now, and it's not going to be for some time. So she needs to reskill. She needs to upskill. And so I'm glad that we're able to make this platform available for others right now in this moment.
Yeah, it's super exciting. It is free and it's accessible for everyone. And there's so many of them, right? There's 10 different ones. There's project management, which I'm very passionate about, but there's also sales and IT, and there's a few other learning paths on there. And I think that, we're getting a little bit closer to our time, but I think that we do want to share that The way to access this, if you guys want to see this and hear more about what we're talking about and see these learning paths, you can find it in opportunity.linkedin.com. We should have a banner showing up somewhere. The people that are working in magic behind the scene are going to do that. But it is a really, really great resource. Really encourage everyone to go on there. So Erica, is there anything else that you want to really kind of leave with the audience here, which is an audience of educators, right? These are the people that are doing this on the ground. So I really, this is a great opportunity for us.
Yeah, I think what we all need to remember is we're all learning in this exact moment. So bringing the communities together and educators and people in the industry to figure out how we can build better solutions in this moment is really what it's all about. So I'm excited for a community like this to come together so we can learn from each other and so we can all rise together. So that's what I'm excited about.
Cool. Yeah, I think, so we have a little bit more time. So I think like what could be interesting for us here is to, let's talk about what LinkedIn Learning is doing in the higher ed. I feel like there's a lot that we've learned from our case studies where LinkedIn Learning is weaved into the curriculum. So it's actually like something we've seen teachers use in their class. And I think that's really interesting. Is there any more data we could, that we could talk about?
Yeah, we're finding that, this is what students are yearning for. Take a practical example, right? You're in the middle of your courses, right? All of a sudden, some emerging trend of a new skill starts to happen. By the time the right course is around it, for you to attend that course and then for you to actually take the time to learn that skill, it's all time. So the sooner that we can be closer to that cutting edge need of that skill, the better it will be for the need for demand of the workforce. And so I think this coupling of this partnership of the foundation of schools are so important. But you need to have this coupling of the latest, cutting edge skill requirements because it's just changing that fast. It's hard for us to keep up. I'm even having a challenge to keeping up. Things are starting to change all the time. So I think the more that we can embrace that mentality and bring that together to, your traditional 4-year degree school or continuing education is really, really important. And there's a lot of great learning, platforms out there to help you do that.
Right. Yeah. It's a lot of like distance learning, right? We just heard a little bit about it, is ability to have that kind of learning tools available from anywhere so your students can do it at any time. I think that's also something that we're going to see in the future extend itself more than it is available now.
Yeah, actually, on that note of learning anywhere, that is something that we added into our learning platform where you can just listen and learn at the same time. Like I'll take a jog, I'll take a run, I'll be getting ready in the morning, and I'll just listen to a course. And there's so many, the more you can multitask or, do it on the way, to eventually when we start commuting back to work. But those are just moments of being able to learn. So the more that we can be efficient of our time is really, really important. So I actually use audio learning all the time. It's a way, just like I do audio books, it just makes it a lot more efficient. And the more that you can if you look at some of our videos and some of our courses, some of them can be like 5 minutes. You complete a whole course, it can be 30 minutes, but I can just learn in these micro moments. And that's where people are at now as well.
Yeah. So it's like having that education accessible to you. And then also having the mentality of choosing when you go on a run to put in the headphones and listen to something new that you can learn. For me, I have a new baby. So it's while I'm cooking or with the baby, I have like headphones in and I'm learning some new skill that could be interesting. But that mentality of like, I am a lifelong learner. I always want to learn. I think that is going to be key to our future workforce member, lifelong learners. Those students right now, they need to really change their mentality. Like it never ends. It just changes.
Right. And not only is it the moment that you need to take the time to learn, you need to take the time to practice what you learned. So that is also something that people have to remember. It's like, oh, I just learned this, but until you practice something, you do it over and over and over again, that's when it starts to really stick and you learn that skill. So that's why having, study groups or online, social groups where you can talk about this challenge. I mean, I think about when I first started coding, I had so many questions on, what this meant or how to practice. Because once you start doing it, you're like, oh, I ran into this bug and I ran into this bug. You don't understand it until you actually start practicing it. So I think that's also a key thing. So the more that we could be social at the same point of learning is also key.
Yeah, and you can learn from your group. I think that's why people are leaning towards social, right? Is because you learn from each other. Like, what better way is to learn than from people that have more experience than you or less experience than you and just different ideas.
Yeah, and it makes it more exciting, right? They say learning can be lonely, right? And so when you're learning from some people, that's the experience in itself. That also helps, you retain the knowledge that you just learned. So I think practicing with others is the most important thing, and it's been vital. Even I think about throughout my career, whether it was in person or distant, you have mentors. The same thing applies here. Nothing different.
Yeah, it's just that right now, we're on different kind of VC and videos, and not necessarily in person, but it doesn't change the fact that we need that social learning. And we've seen that, as you said, with COVID. I think we'll be seeing more of that. I think even if you choose to follow one of our learning paths, I think there's so many other people that are choosing to follow them. You have to keep that in mind. That's why we have questions and answers, and really just engage with the community. Even though it's online, it's still like very powerful because there's a bunch of people out there that are learning the same thing or wanting to learn the same thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Another interesting stat that we have seen is after someone completes a course, what they do is they share it on LinkedIn. And they say, hey, I just completed this. And then that creates a dialogue and this whole viral loop of this community automatically on that same topic. And we've seen shares also increase tremendously on the platform. So that's another signal of, us understanding what people need in this moment. So we're here.
Yeah. And when they complete it, their certificate is then added to their profile. So this is our way of adding and showing, hey, they've learned more. They're continuously learning. I think it's absolutely powerful to see it.
Yeah, and I think the more that people are learning to hire differently also falls into that, right? It's about the skills that people have learned along the way. And so these certificates are the proof and the hours spent to do that. So I think that's another trend that's definitely changing.
Right. Yeah. So we're college degrees, university degrees are the foundation. And that's really where we start. I think those skills, their certification is the future. Yeah. And that is where we really, if there was an ask that we could ask the audience that's listening here, I feel it will be like, help us convert them into these lifelong learners, into this mentality of it never stops.
Yeah, it definitely is a naive approach. When I graduated from college 20 years ago, I thought I was one and done. I'm like, yeah, I'm done. I don't need to continue doing this. It's definitely different now. So good. How we advance.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So I think we might be coming close to some questions.
Yeah. So we're coming to an end, and throughout the summit, we've asked like this core question of what is the one element that will profoundly change within the next few years in the field of education. And I think we talked about it a little bit, but I think we can also summarize it. Would you like to go ahead, Erica?
I think we touched on it on many different angles throughout this conversation. And, the next few years, the field of education, I feel we'll definitely still have our traditional, universities, 4-year degrees. But again, it's just coupling, certificates. I think we'll have more weight and more value of those, whereas in the past, I'm not necessarily think that was also the case. So I think couple of things have to change. One is how people are learning. You're getting these new certificates or you're getting these new credentials, plus you have your 4-year degree behind you, but also the people that are hiring the talent. That is the most important thing that needs to change, right? Because it's a whole funnel process. If you only change one part of it, you're not actually changing the whole solution. So you need to make sure that people are starting to hire differently. And I can just tell you some other things that we've done at LinkedIn, where we created this program called Reach, where maybe someone went to a boot camp or they went to a 4-year degree or they changed majors and they don't have that traditional background of that checklist of how we're going to hire. We actually decided to go and pilot this. And we've been doing it for the last couple of years, where we did it within engineering. And some people just went to boot camp. We trained them how to be an engineer. We did this 9-month program after they did some foundational knowledge of showing us that they had the potential to learn. And then now, guess what? I mean, majority of those people are all software engineers and even getting promotions at LinkedIn. It's really great to see. You know that people have the potential to learn. They just need the opportunity to do so. And so I think thinking like in that way is the pivot point of where we have to change.
Great. So we're getting close to our end time. So I just want to say, first of all, huge thank you, Erica, for making the time to have this conversation today. Even a bigger thank you for all of you who are listening in and having this important conversation in such a relevant moment in time, but just in general, a really important topic. Obviously something that both me and Erica are very passionate about. I do want to remind you that if you want to learn more about what we've talked about today, or maybe take one of our learning paths, share it with your students, share it with your friends, you can find more information on opportunity.linkedin.com. I really, really hope that everyone are going to enjoy their time in the summit and learn more. And thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you more.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this session about the new frontiers. Hello, Professor Asheri. Hello, Mr. Sarfati. Thank you so much for joining us. And I suggest we'll just dive in so we could talk about neuroscience and AI in 20 minutes. So,
hi, good evening.
Good evening to both of you. So, Professor Asheri, maybe you can first try and explain what's between neuroscience and education.
Yeah, I think that will be a great start for this fantastic meeting. So I think that, the main link between learning and neuroscience, so we all learn constantly, basically, throughout our life, from the moment we are born. We learn how to hold a cup, we learn how to walk, how to speak, and later on, we heard about it, we learn how to interact with other people, we learn languages, skiing, solving mathematical problem, and we learn how to adapt ourselves. And as Erica from LinkedIn said, we are all learning also now. So amazingly, everything occurs in our brains. And the main question is how. So basically and practically, the most easiest way to look at it is that when we learn something, the connections between our nerve cells in the brain are strengthening or weakening. And this allows us to learn new things and maybe forget other things. And this process occurs in many areas of the brains and allows us to learn how to ride a bike, how to solve a mathematical problem, and this stays with us, hopefully, for the rest of our life. But interestingly, this learning can be different from person to person. It can also be different between emotional state of a person. So we might need to think about some ways to adopt maybe personalized teaching, personalized learning for each one of us. So that's basically the link between the neuroscience field that is involved in understanding how we learn, how our brain function and dysfunction into the learning field.
And of course, we'll elaborate about it, but maybe a few words about Minducate.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, Tel Aviv University, we established Minducate in collaboration with Yuval Schreiber from Tau Online. And Minducate is a center for learning and science of learning with the idea of enhancing our understanding of learning, to enhance the understanding of human learning, and create a research-based cutting-edge solution for enhancing learning, and also to build a vivid ecosystem and to encourage research-based entrepreneurship. And the idea is really to have researchers coming from different disciplines, from education, from philosophy, from psychology, from neuroscience, and each one of them is bringing his or her own research in order to understand learning better. And we believe from neuroscience that if we understand learning better, we can understand how to boost learning and how to enhance learning. And we can talk later on about different examples from the several projects.
Okay, so we'll, of course, elaborate about it, but Daniel, maybe you could talk about AI. And you know what, let's talk about the future. Will we have teachers in the classrooms in our future?
The answer is yes. And I can stop here. But like many things, I don't know if we will still call them teacher, I hope so. But the role of the teacher is going to be transformed by AI. Like in many other domains in society, when artificial intelligence enter the realm of human intelligence, we don't see an elimination. It's not a replacement paradigm. It's more an augmentation paradigm. And therefore, the teacher, 20 years from now, maybe in the classroom in 7th grade, will still teach, but her role will be different. She will be augmented by all kinds of other artificial intelligence devices that will make her a better teacher. So, yes, we will have teachers, but no, they won't do the same job as they're doing.
But what will we need to learn if everything will be done by machines, if AI could choose for us? What will we do in school?
We will learn. This is what you do in school. Yes, exactly. But the AI is not going to do things for us necessarily. I mean, there is that myth about the robots are coming and they're going to take our job, they're going to take our roles, and we'll stay at home and watch Netflix. No, that's not our future. Our future is more than all our jobs, whether we are a professor, a physician like you, or a CEO. Our jobs are going to be transformed. And how that transformation happens depends very much on how we are thoughtfully blending the essence of human intelligence, as neuroscientists understand it so well, and artificial intelligence. These are two different intelligences. We shouldn't make artificial intelligence think like humans, and we should make humans trying to think like artificial intelligence. The secret is, the recipe is how to blend them in a way that is maximally beneficial to us, the human race.
So, Uri, maybe you could elaborate about the fact that we see that applications and the way we live our lives degenerate parts in our brains. Do you study, for example, what parts of our brains will need more, I don't know how to put it in a way, in words, but what will we need to do to de-degenerate these parts if it's necessary?
No, I don't think that we are undergoing degeneration, even during that stage. We are constantly, hopefully, learning, but we might be able to use several neuroscience tools in order to maybe to enhance or to boost our ability. But maybe I'll give you an example of some of the projects, for example, trying to enhance learning or in mathematical performance. This is something that people discussed during the last 2 days quite extensively. So the idea here is that we can try and apply various brain stimulation to the brain with a closed EEG loop. So let's assume that somebody is doing a mathematical task. While you record his EEG activity, EEG is recording the electrical activity in the brain. And you can see which frequency and which domain, in which area of the brain is active. Now, with the different type of stimulation, you can, with a closed loop, a lot of artificial intelligence machine learning is going to be there to make the loop quite fast. But in the same time that he's learning, you can stimulate this area with the same frequency, and this might enhance the student learning. So the idea is really to, as a personalized, tailor-made stimulation that can enhance brain activity towards a specific task. It's not you that is the AI, it's an AI computer that is sitting near you and allows this fast calculation and stimulation on the same time, measuring the EEG activity and feedback loop to cope it and to make it better. That's the connection that I see between AI, EEG, neuroscience, and learning. One example, for example.
I'm trying to figure out what will remain our duty. What will we need to learn if we don't need to navigate by ourselves, if we don't need to calculate by ourselves? What will be left for us?
I don't think that that's the idea. The idea would be that we might be able to boost a little bit to enhance our ability, but still, I'm quite a believer in the idea that we will learn how to solve problems. We will learn how to integrate information coming from many different disciplines. This might be done by a computer, but I think that the human touch understanding is still there, and we are going to operate the machine to allow us better performance. Hopefully, they won't, exchange us, but that's for the future to see.
So, Daniel, how do you think that AI will be involved in the future classroom?
Yeah, so I think in two ways. I can think of many ways, but I think in two ways. There are a lot of the discussions over the past 2 days in this fascinating conference have been around this notion of personalized learning. People call it adaptive learning, individualized learning. And the notion is that we are all individuals. We all learn very differently. Maybe learning is a great differentiator between the different styles and the different preferences, the different speed of learning. And when you have a classroom of 30 kids, it's very difficult for a single teacher. Some star teachers, Mrs. Smith in 3rd grade was able to do that, but it's very difficult for a teacher to tailor the curriculum and the learning and the pedagogical approach to each individual student. What if some AI would have all the data about these students, all their historical data, the way they learn, what they have done, and is able to tailor a learning path individually for each one of them? And the role of the teacher will be kind of the same role that the pilot doesn't fly the airplane anymore. The pilot supervises an autonomous system that flies the airplane. The same thing in the classroom. The teacher may be able then to let the intelligent tutoring system guide the student, and from time to time nudge it here and nudge it there, because the teacher will have the intuition and the instinct that is very uniquely human to this day to be able to continue to be the teacher. So maybe the augmented teacher, augmented by this AI system that personalized and does that very, what we call today, precision learning, so that you don't relearn things that you already know, and you go deeper on things that you need to know. Maybe that augmented teacher will be better than the very best teacher. That's the whole notion, that it's the same with the radiologist in medicine today. The best AI systems do not do better than the very best radiologist in the world to detect a tumor in the brain. But the average radiologist, augmented by the right AI system, together as a team, perform better than the best radiologists in the world. That's
so maybe I should have asked you if there will be any classrooms, because you see also in this crisis, the COVID-19 crisis, that people are staying at home. Maybe the school and the AI teacher will be at home.
maybe, and maybe it will also be at home and facilitate the great absence of this distributed learning that we are in the midst of during COVID-19, which is a peer-to-peer learning. The reason the classroom works so well is that you not just learn from the material or learn from the teacher, but you learn also from the questions of the other students or the answers of the other students. And maybe that, artificial intelligence will be able to measure the right things and then feed that back to the right people at the right students at the right time to maximize learning. Yes.
So Uri, maybe one of the most significant leverage of this idea is that any difficulty for students like dyslexia, dyscalculation, will be gone. I don't know, it will be something we could ignore.
So I hope that with new abilities we can really help people with disabilities, with dyslexia, and overcome their limitation. This is something I think we are going to. If I may comment on what Daniel just said, that I think that there is still a gap that I see between the future as we would like to see it and where we are now. I think that at the moment we must have some change in the teaching system. Although all of us continue to teach with different platform like Zoom and Meet and Team, I think this platform really provided us technical abilities. They are a great platform for that, but I think that in the next year or years, the university must invest and develop, and people have discussed it, the more intuitive, interactive, a hybrid way of teaching first before we introduce the AI teacher into the room. I think that might take a few more years, but first we need to solve, I think, the current situation. So we need to use more and more interactive between the teacher online and the student. It might be partially hybrid and partially not hybrid.
So maybe this is the next question. How quickly do you think we'll see these changes? And how do you think governments are applying these changes and systems?
So, Hila, I think that if we had this conversation 5 months ago, will we have the same questions and answers? I think to a great extent, yes. What COVID-19 has done is that accelerated some processes that were already there. So it's kind of a catalyst, an accelerator of sorts of transforming learning. For example, the United States Navy, which is a huge organization with several 100,000 people, is already transforming the very same thing that we've been talking about. This notion of each sailor is an individual, that at any point in the career of a sailor, he or she will have a choice to basically pick up something on LinkedIn or on YouTube or on anything, because the system will tell him or her, hey, we think you need to become a better expert at that particular task that is your task. So there will be kind of a system that will guide you through that learning, but not just in the classroom, not even in the distributed classroom, but throughout your entire career. And that's really is the vision for the future, that learning is not going to be a moment. Learning is going to be a continuum throughout your career, way beyond university, way beyond graduate school, but into your work life.
Mm-hmm. Uri, the same question?
So I think that I would have answered it a little bit different. So 6 months ago, we would have said it will take another 3, 4, 5 years to start this online teaching. Mm-hmm. But COVID brought us to the stage that we must do it now, and I think we did it within the last month, really extremely good. and there is still a way to go, but I think that the universities must continue in this direction and lead not only university education, but education in schools, in colleges, as a whole. Since I think, as many people mentioned here, I think that's the most important thing is really to get the best out of each one of us, and this started in education and in good teacher and in good teaching. So I hope we'll take it to the next stage together, and it's also very important to have this kind of meeting to brainstorm, bring ideas, create collaboration, and push them forward.
So we will end this session by the question that is asked during all the sessions. What is the one element that will profoundly change within the next few years in the field of education, in your opinion?
Ori, you want to start?
No, I think that this is time for us to invest in ourselves, invest in our future, and really invest in education and in the next generation. So I think that the next school year will be different. We need much more easy, more engaging activity integrated, and I think that will really lead us to the next stage. Again, collaborating with as many professionals from different directions, that each one of them will supplement and complement, and will allow us a better future.
Daniel?
I personally think that one of the most transformative elements, many of them, certainly progresses in artificial intelligence or neuroscience or other technologies is one. But I think the big transformation is a realization that learning doesn't happen in a particular place and a particular time. We heard today from presidents of university that are putting thousands of courses online that are there for anybody to take. A kid in Malaysia can pick up a course from MIT and get and learn from it. A skill can be taught on a YouTube video. And I think this notion of separating learning at school and at the university, followed by a period of working, as Yuval Harari told us, is becoming an obsolete notion. That in order to survive in our work, to continue to be able to have jobs and to continue to excel and grow, we need to continuously learn, and we need to continuously learn because we'll have access to all these incredible resources. The notion of having had a PhD 10 years ago is much less important than the notion of keeping up with the knowledge and skills demand of our jobs now and in the future. And therefore, the ubiquity and permanence of learning is going to dominate, I know, perhaps not my generation, but certainly my kids' generation.
That was fascinating, and it was the tip of the iceberg. Thank you so much for both of you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon in Chicago, good morning good evening in Israel. And so this session is the power of data-driven education and personalization, a shift. We go to the K-12 education marketplace. I'm Clement Erdman. My background is in private equity, 25 years investing in the education space, where education intersects with technology. And we have today two companies who are come to the table from different perspectives. It's the practical part of the program. The first company, and both companies are focused on the collection and utilization of data in teaching. The first company is Mayan Yave, who is co-founder of Taylor Ed. Taylor Ed is based in Israel, and although has developed a nice market in Israel, is now starting to market in the United States. I met Mayan about 2 years ago, and I think that was very early in the show. Brad Heilman is the co-founder of Exploros, based in the US, although the technology development is done in Israel and focused on the US market. So we have a slightly different perspective from each of the participants today. So let's go ahead. Mayan, could you tell us your vision for the company and what does Taylor Ed do?
Yeah, definitely. So basically the goal of Taylor Ed is to help provide students the most effective learning experience that are specific or tailored to the needs of students. And this kind of comes from the problem of how the variability of the needs of students and the ratio of one teacher to 20-something students makes it almost impossible to understand the needs of students and to be able to tailor instruction to the specific needs. And so that is kind of why we built Taylor Ed, where Taylor Ed is a platform for teachers to create lesson plans that are tailored to the needs of students. And what that looks like is basically teachers send these short assessments to students to understand both their social, emotional, and proficiency needs. And then based on the data of what the students answer, the platform knows how to basically create lesson plans that are differentiated or tailored to the needs of students.
Thank you. I think we'll get into a number of aspects there a little later in terms of the SEL and the lesson plans. Brad, could you give us the goals of the product and what problem it addresses?
Sure. Thanks, Clement. I'll start with the problems that we see in education that we're trying to tackle. Teaching today, we feel, is more complex than ever. You've got many teachers are new or new to their subject. There's rigorous state standards, there's student-centered learning, there's tech enablement, and then on top of it, you toss in COVID and the need for remote learning, and it's a very complicated situation for teachers. Number two, students are generally disengaged. Unfortunately, in a Gallup poll of 5 million US students in grades 5 through 12, 51% of students said they were not engaged in school. And number three, there's very little data from the live classroom and frankly, the remote classroom. It's generally a black box, and when a teacher or a student are struggling, it's often hard to tell until it's too late. Exploros is designed to address these challenges. We're a teacher-guided social platform specifically for device-enabled classrooms, and we offer curriculum in the form of course playlists. So for example, 5th grade English or US history. With Exploros, teachers actively guide the learning experience, whether it's face-to-face or remote. And so in that way, Exploros is augmenting teachers by handling a lot of the nuts and bolts of staging social lessons. Perhaps most important, all students in an Exploros lesson contribute to the learning experience using devices and social media skills. So students are taking polls, they're sharing graphic organizers, they're brainstorming as a class or in small groups. And teachers see this information live, which helps them then tailor the instruction. And at the same time, Exploros analytics are automatically providing visibility into curriculum progress and learning standards achievement and other important pieces of information. We're a Google partner, an Amazon partner, and we're Lenovo's classroom orchestration solution for North and South America.
Thank you. Mayan, the center of your direction and collection of data seems to be, as an outsider, it seems to be the algorithm that you've developed. How is that used by the teacher? And what is the what other data? What is the data that is collected by the algorithm or inputted to the algorithm?
Yeah, so when we set out to build Taylor Ed, we kind of dug into the learning science behind what are the factors that impact student learning. And while it's very common to be able to assess in the data, understand the proficiency data of students, when we dug into kind of the latest learning science research, we understand the increasing role of social and emotional factors in that learning process, and as a result, incorporated into the algorithm, basically measuring the data of proficiency of students for a specific topic for a lesson, but alongside that, being able to measure additional social and emotional factors such as confidence, motivation, social aptitude, memory, and focus. And basically, while this data is gathered, it's incorporated back into the system, and it's basically represented in two different ways. First, it's basically represented back to the teacher. So the teacher can, as if I kind of take it back to the vision is basically to make effective learning experiences and to be able to make decisions based on efficacy. And in that way, the data is represented back to the teacher, who can see what has worked, what hasn't worked, where every student is, and what's the reason that student is. So if it's low motivation or high confidence, where each student needs more support. In addition, that data is also integrated into our algorithm and helps for the next time a teacher creates a lesson, it helps recommend the most effective resources for each student group. And based on the data, each time the algorithm basically learns what is the most effective resource or student group for each one of those, for each lesson. So basically it gets better and better kind of over time, the more it is used.
Do you provide a library of resources to augment this?
Yes, and I think that is a big differentiating factor for Taylor Ed, is one of the issues that we actually don't create the content. We sit up on top of existing resources. And basically we have a tagging system that tags the resources by different strategies. And therefore the algorithm knows to rank each of the resources by how effective it was along those kind of 6 factors that we measure. And so currently have a very large repository of open and free content resources that are recommended and incorporated into our lessons.
Thank you. Brad, how is your data collected, and how does the teacher use the data to improve instruction?
Well, in Exploros, there's a teacher view and a student view of every learning experience. So most of our data is collected by students entering it directly in the course of social classroom instruction, whether it's face-to-face or remote. So for example, in a typical 45-minute class, there may be 350 student responses posted to the platform. The way that we do it is that the learning experiences that students are posting within are instrumented to know which learning standards are being addressed. And so we also augment that data set with things like time on standard and efficacy on standard. But let me give you a use case. You asked how it improves instruction. There's a lot of different ways, but let's focus on the real time for the moment. If I'm a teacher in a classroom and I can get a sense in real time as to whether or not my class is picking up what we're working on within the classroom learning experience or struggling with it, I can use that information to do things like adjust my pacing, to spend more time on verbal dialogue around things that may be complicated, to reteach misconceptions and sort of capture that moment in real time. So basically, I've got visibility into student and class understanding at my fingertips as a teacher, and that really enables a short feedback loop in the live classroom, which is a great place to be addressing things like misconceptions. So that's one way in which we help improve outcomes.
Mayan, you mentioned that the student really inputs the data, or it's taken from the data. How reliable is that data? Do you have to clean it at all? Do you have to, in any way, manipulate it to make it acceptable to be used in the algorithm?
Yeah, and so the way it works, and every time a lesson plan is created on Taylor Ed, an exit ticket or a formative assessment is basically automatically generated with every lesson plan. And the assessments all have the same structure. They have 1 to 5 questions that are aligned to the standards-based kind of proficiency, assessing the proficiency. But then there are 5 additional questions that each one is tagged to basically measure one of the social emotional factors. And while there are many ways to assess the social emotional factors, the way we chose to assess it is through basically questions that are kind of based on academic questionnaires and surveys that indicate behaviors associated with that factor. So let's take an example of a question that kind of wants to assess confidence, and kind of how confident are you that you kind of achieved the learning goal of this lesson, for example. And the students basically rate themselves on kind of a Likert 1 to 5 scale. And as a result, as they answer the exit tickets, the data kind of goes back into the system as each question is tagged alongside as one of those factors. And so it doesn't need to go through, it doesn't have to be interpreted or has no human intervention. Basically goes into that data. It basically goes back into the system and then exposed, as we said, kind of through an analytical dashboard that helps what's the motivation level, what's the confidence level of the classroom for this specific lesson, and for each student who might need more attention, what is the reason why?
Thank you. Going back to Brad, does the teacher need to adapt in any way the flow of information in order to consume the data?
Well, I think that let me sort of address the way in which data is used to basically adjust the flow of instruction. So I already touched a little bit on the real-time experience where teachers get a sense of what students understand and can adjust the real-time moment accordingly. Mayan mentioned an exit ticket kind of a concept. We think of data in timescales. So there's real time, there's end of lesson, there's end of unit, there's end of year. And each one of these use cases has a different impact on sort of instructional improvement. But to give you an example of sort of an exit ticket style way in which data can impact instruction and that teachers can use it to adjust the way in which they teach. Take a middle school or a high school teacher, for example, who might be teaching 3, 4, 5 sections of the same subject. With an exit ticket, on one hand, they can get a sense of how it went with the particular class. On another hand, they're teaching often that same subject to a different section and can use that information to adjust how they're going to teach the next time to focus on places where students may have struggled. And certainly you can take the outcome of that exit ticket and feed it into how you approach the learning the next day. So that's one example. I mean, the key to data-driven instruction is having the visibility and putting that visibility in the hands of teachers. Then they have more insight with which to make decisions.
Let me follow up personalized data or the ability to personalize teach. I mean, I think it's there's a lot of discussion about what does that really mean, personalized? Is it individualized? Is it forming groups that learn in the same manner? How do you address that?
Who's the question for, Clement?
That's for you, Brad. Sorry.
Oh, okay, sure. I think that there's a lot of different perceptions of personalized learning. Certainly in the EdTech space, there is a lot of what might be considered adaptive individualized learning, and that's valuable. I think our take on personalization has a lot to do with connecting students to the topic and providing students an opportunity to take ownership. You know, if students can own the learning for themselves, and in our case do that in a social setting where you get to contextualize the learning with other students, that is a way in which it becomes personal. And that is a way in which it can be personalized. I think it's a little bit different than how a lot of companies view it. But when you look at education, a big aspect of the motivation in education is the fact that it is social and that there's peer-to-peer interaction. And we're trying to augment that interaction and provide every student a voice. And with that voice, you increase ownership. If you increase ownership, it becomes much more personal.
Thank you. Mayan, how does the teacher encourage collaboration and teach the skills of collaboration? And if you can also touch on what's the role of SEL in motivation, since it's all connected.
No, definitely. I think for us, specific in Taylor Ed, collaboration and in general, the 21st century skills are something that are embedded in the instruction that we want to provide those effective learning experiences. An example for that is, and Bradley was talking about it, many people view personalized or education as kind of individualized education. And we actually, in our tool, for example, for a specific lesson, suggest ways to group students in a way that's personalized or tailored to that classroom. So you might have like a high motivation group or a low confidence group, and these are actually working groups for the classroom for this specific lesson. And on top of that, we also, of the many resources we also suggest group activities for these groups. And this way you kind of embed the collaboration in the instruction. It's not kind of learning how to collaborate, it's embedding collaboration in the very essence of the instruction.
Thank you. I guess with the time left, we'll fit in the obligatory question, and for each of you, what is the one element that will profoundly change in education and learning within the next few years? Maya.
Okay. So I think for us, it's like a twofold. The way I see it, I think the current situation as we're seeing a whole paradigm shift where the use of ed tech and blended learning becomes more even a productivity tool and not a nice to have. And that as that kind of paradigm shift happens, we're going to see a lot of more and more blended learning in the very core of instruction, and as well as the rise of social emotional learning is part of that instruction, because it goes very much hand in hand, those two, and the role kind of increases as we go to a more blended learning model.
And Brad, what is the one element that will profoundly change in education learning within the next few years?
Well, Clement, I can tell you what I can hope for. I think that the best thing would be to have technology augment instruction, meaning helping teachers. So the most important thing, certainly I think in K-12 in education, is teachers. And if technology is something that can facilitate what teachers do on a daily basis, which is most common social instruction, and assist teachers in getting better outcomes, that I think is the best role. We don't want to replace teachers with technology, just like in medicine, we're not trying to replace doctors with technology. We're trying to improve outcomes. And I think if we can focus on that, a lot of good can happen.
Thank you. Well, Mayan and Brad, thank you very much for your time. It's been very interesting, and I'm sure we pushed the little envelope of knowledge a little further, and good luck to both of you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Hi, Andre.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here with our friends from the IAC, Tel Aviv University, and with Jeff and member Manette Mayberg, who's going to talk about some of the issues we've been discussing about education from the funder's perspective. My name is Andres Pokoini, and I'm the CEO and president of the Jewish Funders Network. Manette is the head and the soul of the Mayberg Foundation, and one of the most committed philanthropic leaders in this field. So, I was wondering if Manette, you can share very briefly your vision and your commitment to Jewish education.
Sure. Thanks, Andre. You know, as a Jewish funder, I'm interested most in building strong future generations of Jews and Jewish leaders. And Jewish education is the best way to do it. However, I think that we have to re-examine the big picture of what we're trying to accomplish through Jewish education itself. I believe that we need to think about putting the distinction, the holiness that's imbued in all of Jewish education back in. And let me explain. I'm going to explain by quoting historian Rabbi Beryl Wine, who spoke at one of our early retreats. And he said this. He said, "We've been involved."
And what do you think the innovations that you've been investing in the past in your work with Jewish education? I mean, your focus is mainly educational innovation. What do you think is? Are we seeing these innovations play out now during the coronavirus crisis?
Well, absolutely. I think that anyone who's been visionary in Jewish education innovation has been moving toward more intrinsic motivation as opposed to extrinsic motivation, which means that we have to build the students' autonomy in terms of choice in their education. And we have to make the material relevant for the student. We're finding through our innovative model data collection that relevance is a key component. And all of the different modes that we've been talking about all throughout the conference, asynchronous learning and project-based learning and blended learning, these are all beautiful, beautiful new and cutting-edge modes of conveying education. And those are all working toward that goal of giving the student more control and therefore more desire and hunger to learn, as opposed to an externally imposed evaluation process whereby they're just working toward a grade.
So the pandemic is sort of a great accelerator, I think, of processes that you have been seeing all along and you have been working on it. How do you think that the landscape is going to be different for funders like you? What are the priorities going to be different in the next 12 months or when we go out of this crisis?
Well, I think that funders of Jewish education on a national level have traditionally not been as focused on partnering and collaborating with the individual communities and local funders. And we have always been a proponent of collective action in terms of that type of philanthropic partnering with those who are right there on the ground with their finger on the pulse of the communities and the schools. So I hope to be seeing more of that movement. I think that the COVID situation is opening up opportunity in that area, which is really a fantastic way to proceed in terms of thinking about future Jewish education funding.
Right. And, you know, you talked about how funding is going to change in certain ways. One of the things that you mentioned, I think it's very accurately the connection more between the national and the local. Are there any funding patterns that you see changing? Not what you fund, but how you fund.
Yeah, well, that's what I was just speaking to with the, we need to see more philanthropists participating in national funding collective effort. We make an effort in our Jewish education funding to reach out to other philanthropists in the field and to try to band together, because the truth is that it's really up to the philanthropists to envision the future. It's up to our unbelievable, creative, capable, talented educators to execute. But funders really can really make a difference in terms of pushing forward the agenda. And I think that the agenda's gotta be, what is going to be the long-term result of Jewish education? Are we building strong future generations? Are we really putting in place the pieces that are going to strengthen Jewish identity and future Jewish communal participation and leadership? Are we using the wisdom and values that have really sustained us through the ages? Are we using that to the best of our ability to develop and shape the strongest future generations that we possibly can? And that's what I, as a funder, am finding other like-minded philanthropists to partner with, to make sure that the educators aren't getting stuck in complacency and are pushing forward with the big vision in mind.
But you're also, as a funder, you can also absorb the risk of the system, meaning you can allow educators on the ground to take risks, right? You can fund those risks, you can find all that innovation that you were talking before, and give the educators on the ground the permission to dream, as it were, and to sort of imagine new ways of doing their work.
That's right. It is definitely when funders choose to fund innovation and to take those risks, then we are providing an invaluable platform for educators who perhaps before never had the opportunity to exercise those visions and dreams that they had. I mean, look, the truth is that for too long, Jewish education, 70, 80 years now, has been imitating general studies education. It's a mistake. It's sort of a little bit of losing our way. Why?
Right.
Because the goals of general studies education are very different than the goals of Jewish education. With general studies, you are building knowledge, you are building skills, you are building toward a career. In Jewish education, you are building a human being. You are building the core of a person.
And you're building also a collective identity. Yeah.
Yeah, identity, love of learning, enthusiasm to be part of the Jewish community and Jewish, all of those ingredients are going in there when students are developing. And if they're getting the wrong messaging by being evaluated by traditional processes that might say, hey, you know what? You get a C. You're only average in understanding Chumash. Well,
right.
What does that student internalize? their self-esteem starts to plummet, their Jewish self-esteem.
The confidence to approach the subject. But if you have to zero in on one thing that you think is going to profoundly change as we emerge from this crisis, what would you think that would be in terms of education and how we fund it?
I think it's going to be the role of the educator. It's very clear that COVID has created this opening for all of the technological advances to speed up. They were in process and they were being used and tested. Now it's become a necessity to use them. So I want to say it this way. Technology can perhaps do some things better than a teacher. And I was just listening to the prior session about artificial intelligence and augmented reality and all of this maybe being superior to the traditional conveyance of education. However, as much as we can utilize the best of technology, I do believe that there is an invaluable role that Jewish educators hold in shaping and developing, like I said, a human being.
Right.
And no technology can do that. So I think we're going to see a shift from the educator feeling that their primary goal is to get through material and evaluate how well the student retained that material to, God willing, that I'm an essential component of how this human being is going to emerge from the system.
Yeah, that's very powerful, and I think it's a good way to finish our very brief conversation here. I just want to say that what you said two things that for me are critical. You said that funders are collaborating among themselves, and I think that as funders are collaborating among themselves more than ever, schools and different educational institutions should do the same and should collaborate more. And I think that you ended with a beautiful note, with I think very positive note that technology can help us, but ultimately it's the human being using that technology that is going to determine the quality of our Jewish education and therefore of our Jewish community. So thank you, Manette, very, very much for all you do and for having this brief chat that I hope we can expand later on.
Yes, thank you.
And thank to the IAC for hosting us.
Everyone, it's great to see you all, and and good afternoon to our audience. It's basically the last and final session of the summit before we all leave for the breakout sessions. It's another great opportunity to thank our partners in Tel Aviv University Online. And really, after we zoomed out and looked at the world of education beyond the boundaries of the Jewish world, it is really time to zoom in. And we heard Manette, it was really inspiring. And this time of crisis is also a great time and opportunity. It's a time for us to reimagine Jewish education and how can we make it affordable and accessible to all. It is time to reimagine Israel and Hebrew studies. It is also time to reimagine Jewish collaboration in education and beyond. And for that, we have here today 5 of the most substantial and influential leaders in the Jewish world that now more than ever are playing a vital role in shaping the future of our community in America and globally. So we have here Jeremy Fingerman, is the CEO of the Foundation for Jewish Camp. Eric Fingerhut is the president and CEO of the Jewish Federations of North America. And Paul Bernstein is the founding CEO of Prisma, the Center for Jewish Day Schools. Andre Spokojny is the president and CEO of the Jewish Founders Network. Just heard him in the session before. And Amira Aharonovich, the CEO and Director General of the Jewish Agency for Israel, Sochnut. So welcome, guys. And at the end of the day, when we were talking a lot about education and technology and innovation, but our core purpose is building a community, all of us. And it is all about togetherness and belonging. And my question to you is, the social interactions is so critical for the development of a community, of education. How can we maintain this critical element in a world of distance learning and physical distance? Eric, do you want to start?
Sure, Shalom. Thank you so much for having us and to be with these distinguished colleagues. I'll just say two things. First, I want to say that we have to do everything we can to, as quickly as we possibly can, enable us to be back together again in in-person experiences. And it behooves those of us who are involved in community to recognize that there's going to be cost, there's going to be needs that our schools, our camps, our JCCs, our Hillels, all are going to need to reopen. They're going to need the right standards. They're going to need testing. They're going to need all sorts of equipment. And we have to help, because we need, as the premise of your question so correctly said, we need to be back together again as quickly as we can. But secondly, we do need to remember, and I heard this a little bit at the end of the conversation, the wonderful conversation Andres was having with Manette, that we have to remember that it is an experience. Jews are the masters of experiential education. Remember, we invented Seders, we invented Parshat HaShavua, that's the whole experience. And so we can build a quality experience. My colleagues on this panel have done so, Camps and Jeffy, that interacts between people individually and on screen. But let's remember, it's not the technology, it's the experience, it's the quality of the experience.
Paul, how to keep this social interaction in the virtual day schools?
Well, thank you, Shaham, and thanks to IEC and also to your partners at Tel Aviv University for a great experience over these 2 days. You're right in making connections and community the first and the centerpiece of our conversation, and I thank you for doing it. In fact, when I look back to how schools adapted rapidly and innovatively to the crisis when closure started back in March, one of the most important aspects of their success was the communities that they already had and the way that they brought not just students together, but families together. So right from day one, those that were most successful were the ones that were drawing their community in, communicating with them actively and repeatedly. And as we look forward, I think what Eric says is absolutely right and absolutely central. Everybody is working tirelessly for the day when they can safely be back in person. And at the same time is working equally tirelessly to be adaptable to the reality that it's likely in the next 12 months we're going to have to be sometimes in person and often remote again.
Jeremy, summer camp is all about social interaction and energy and sitting around the fireplace and like singing together. How do you make it happen in a distance world?
Well, one way to think about it is camp is, we found camp is year-round and lifelong. And as Paul described, when this pandemic happened, camps immediately started to create community or engage their community by coming together, whether it was for Shabbat song sessions, Havdalah services, concerts, and the like. And everything that's happened online, it's been far more than any of us anticipated. And I think it is about the glue. That was the glue of holding the community together. We'll yearn for the time to be back together, to be back at camp, back at that magical place. But it's amazing when you think about camp as a year-round and lifelong. We have to create experiences that can transcend the place and the time. And I think we're finding this right now in a really powerful way.
Amira, shlichim, energy, singing out loud, hugging. Where does it come to place in a distance world?
Yeah, so as an organization that strives to connect and engage and create dialogue and build relationship that turns then to sense of belonging and mutual responsibility, I would say our major kind of tools and interventions are very much based on the face-to-face meetings, encounters, whether it's through our shlichim around the world or whether it's through the Israel experiences or partnerships, etc. So this current situation definitely caught us in a way where all those amazingly proven tools with huge impact are under limitations and questions. And so we immediately had to transform them to be ones that are happening on the online and the virtual space. And I should say with a huge blast of creativity, we have seen our shinshinim, our younger shlichim, unfortunately had to be brought to Israel, more than 200 of them coming back from their different countries. But yet again, sitting in Israel 7 or 10 hours apart and creating a whole week of activities from day to night, making sure that they keep on connecting and engaging with the young students in the schools and the synagogues and the youth movements, etc. The same for the summer camp. This has been the first year ever where we had to cancel the departure of 1,600 Israeli IDF graduates who were supposed to go to more than 200 summer camps. Nevertheless, we have offered them to the different camps as being kind of educators from a distance, and it was very encouraging to see more than 100 camps that have chosen to take those. And so we have transformed bringing Israel into camp. Camp has transformed, and then we have transformed the way we bring Israel into camp. And in the same way, our Israel Fellows on campuses, where the whole scene of campuses has transformed, and a lot of questions of what that would become to be now when the next school year has to open. And yet again, together with Hillel at Home, and some other initiatives, we took all our 100 shlichim, Israeli Fellows, and they have transformed to work from their computers and in the online world. So this is just one example in the world of shlichut. We're facing that also in the world of Israel experiences, but it's waking up to a morning where we have to find alternative way to create experiences that enable engagement and create connections, understanding that this change is to a lot of would stay in a lot of aspects. So we're going to have to find those alternative ways because we can't give up on the mission itself.
Right. Andre, if you look at the bigger picture of a very physical community, Jewish community, how do you envision that works in a non-physical world?
So we also, as everybody else, we pivoted to virtual. This is the word of the year, pivot. We had our conference virtually, but I want to focus on something else. I want to be optimistic for a change and talk about what the pivot to virtual allowed us to discover. So first of all, I think it impacted for better the quality of every of all Jewish education and all Jewish activity. What happens is that when everything is virtual, all of a sudden we have access to content that we never had access to, right? You can have a star lecturer giving a Zoom class, and it can be accessed by everybody. It's not limited to your synagogue or to your JCC or to your school. So there has been a significant increase in the quality of the offer in Jewish education. Participation has grown actually in many areas. Of course, I wouldn't choose to be in lockdown again, but I'm saying that when we come out of this, there are lessons to be learned about how Jewish life can be transformed for the better, but by the things we discovered during this pandemic.
Eric, I would like to go back to you with a different hat. You're the previous CEO and president of Hillel. And Hillel is a very physical home, right? The thing about Hillel is that you get there and you feel like home. How does it work, and how Hillel makes itself even more relevant in this time of crisis and physical distancing?
Well, in my previous answer, I used the word experience, which I think is really critical. And now I want to use the word relationship. Hillel had learned for years before the pandemic that it really wasn't about the physical facility. Obviously, it's nice to have a wonderful place to gather for Shabbat dinner, and we're always going to want that and to study and all that. But that it was about getting out and building relationships with students, between student leaders and other students, between professionals and students, between the shlichim that Amira spoke about, these beautiful, wonderful Israelis that come to our campuses, thanks to the Jewish Agency, and the students, so they have a real relationship with a real Israeli. So it's about relationships anyway. And as we've learned, and everybody else has said, you can sustain relationships, you can nurture relationships if you do it in smart ways and thoughtful ways online. So of course we want to be back. We want to be back together. Remember that the thing about college is you can already get all the lectures from college online. Why do people come to campus? They come to campus. Why do parents spend the money to send their kids to live in dorms and all that? Because the total experience of being together, it's a little bit like camp, right? That it's a 24-hour immersion in the experience of learning and growing and being in an intellectual environment. So the relationship is critical, but we still have to make sure that the total comprehensive experience. I know Hillel's tried to do that with Hillel at Home, just as Camp has done, and others. So we're going to sustain it as well as we can online, but we've got to get back together into that experience.
So we're just after like a day and a half talking about the innovation in education and the technology and beyond. What can the Jewish world learn from the bigger world? What can we change that we've never done before in day schools, particularly, and beyond? But I would like to focus on the education part.
Sure. I mean, when I look back to what I was doing before we started Prisma 4 years ago, I was involved in a number of areas of education reform, often in disadvantaged urban communities. And every now and again, I would go and visit a project, for example, at times when there were schools using different modalities within a classroom of one-to-one learning, of group learning, of individual student-driven learning. Before, I think we saw a lot of this happening in Jewish day schools, and wishing that that might be available to my kids in their Jewish day school. And I think what we have seen in the situation around COVID is the ability of Jewish day schools to embrace innovations and bring them to their students very rapidly, as we have done in online learning. So in the wider education world, there are all of these ideas bubbling around every day. Sometimes in K-12, I've also been very interested through this summit in listening to some of the ideas coming out of higher education. Our ability to listen and learn to some of the best ideas that are out there and then bring them to our environments, I think is a real opportunity. And not only that, I think that because our schools have really demonstrated their capabilities as innovators, we can also continue to adapt those ideas and develop them even further, and also, of course, develop them in the unique environment we have with the dual curriculum of secular and Judaics, and obviously the use of Ivrit, in ways that I think others might well want to take back to the wider educational sector as well. And that's a place for us to develop, to be ahead of the game, and then to be able to share with education in general.
Jeremy, at summer camps, I must tell you, we're doing it tremendously and moving very quickly to the online world. What is the thing that you learned during this time that you didn't know 2 months ago, 3 months ago, in terms of innovation? What have you seen outside in the world that you say, okay, this is how I'm going to do it the next time?
Great question. I think what we've seen is that you can create this sense of community, this sense of belonging. I love the word belong that's been used. The experiences that Eric described, you can create that in an online community. I think what we all have to be open to is there are so many innovative ways to bring it to life, bring both these experiences to life, the sense of belonging to life through technology, but augmented in other ways, that That's what we can't be afraid to do. I love what Mehmet said with Andreas earlier about how we create relationships with funders, national and local, to actually fund some of these innovative approaches for camps or schools, how we start blurring the silos. I think that's what we can learn and take from this experience and benefit the whole community.
Amira, online learning is not new to Jaffe. I remember that the first week, I think, of the crisis, there was already a training about online learning. But what are the new things you've learned in the last 5 months that you didn't know before March?
So I think that that the opportunity that we have is really create something which is much more deeper and systemic. And so making sure both in the services that we give as an organization and in the engagement opportunities that we create, that we have a systemic and a kind of a pre-planned way by which we enable our different participants and target audiences to use the virtual space and the online space in order to do that. I'll give just 2 examples. When we look at the world of partnerships, so our world of partnership was based a lot on exchanges and missions between teachers and doctors and youth and volunteers and professionals and what so. But mainly on physical face-to-face meeting, not necessarily using the opportunity to create long, deeper connection, dialogue, and even mutual creation. And the school twinning network that has started a few years ago, really in order to kind of match between classes, but again, all towards a someday meeting, now transforms into being a whole annual work plan of a year of teachers and students learning together, some of it synchronized, unsynchronized, and really enables them to get a deeper familiarity with one another and really relationships, as Eric mentioned, create those relationships. So I think for us, that's kind of the major opportunity, not to use this online sphere only to get interactions. You know, Michael Rosnack, I think, was the one who talks about, you know, interaction versus dialogue, or I would say versus relationship. So I think for us, it's how do we use that not only in a technical way, just to create more people on the screen with more people, but kind of stretch it and deepen the content, and make sure that those are building relationship over time, which are deeper and are creating thoughts and other ways of creativity in Jewish life.
Andre, you spoke about opportunities, you spoke about elevating the quality of Jewish education. What other opportunities you see there that we can reimagine a Jewish education and how we can use innovation used outside of this Jewish education world that we couldn't do before?
So I think that there's 2 ways of looking at this crisis, and you can look at it as a blip in the map. Things go back to normal, and when we can get together, and I'd like to see it as an earthquake, as something that comes, destroys, for good or for bad, it destroys. But then when we rebuild better and stronger. And I think that, and I like the earthquake analogy, because what makes the building stronger in an earthquake is not that it's more robust, is that it moves. That they build them on cylinders, so they move with the earthquake. So I think that one of the big lessons here, and a way of rebuilding the Jewish communities and Jewish institutions in general, is institutions that are more flexible, more adaptable, that can pivot fast. I think that creating networks is very important. Collaboration. I mean, we at JFN and Eric at JFNA and Jeremy, all of us are collaborating much more than we've ever did. And well, we needed the crisis to do it. So, but it put collaboration on overdrive, really. And I think that that's something that shouldn't go back to normal. We should really change the way in which we operate and be more networked, more nimble, more flexible, and sort of embrace change in a different manner. So, there's going to be a tendency to say, okay, let's go back to normal. But I would caution us, let's not. let's think. Let's imagine this offers us a possibility of thinking, how would we rebuild the system if it didn't exist, right? So if we can do that, even as an intellectual exercise, we'll be the richer for that.
Andre, as usual, talks about the next question that I have. So, is it really Jeremy, is it a temporary blimp, like you call it, or it's an earthquake or paradigm shift? Are we going to go back to March 2020, or life has changed for Jewish people, for the Jewish world?
I'll use the tsunami example. I think it is a tsunami. I think we're already doing things very differently, and post-pandemic, we're going to be in a new future, a new reality. What are we taking with us, though? As Andres describes what's on stilts, it's still going to be about community building. It's still going to be the emotional connection that we can create with one another. It's giving all of us tools and new quality tools to inspire us to live Jewish lives. And I think that's not going to change. How it gets delivered may change. How we work together. I think about this blending of schools and camps, about Israel and diaspora. We're going to come out of this with no borders anymore. And that's exciting and gives us lots of opportunities.
Eric, temporary or paradigm shift?
I'm going to come down somewhere in the middle. I'm not quite sure that I'm at earthquake and tsunami, because maybe it's, look, I'm currently the head of an organization that has been dealing with crises in the Jewish community for over a century and a half. I was the head of an organization, Hillel, that for over 100 years, from before the creation of the state of Israel, before the Holocaust, before the, created a home for Jews on campus. I also, some of you know, I led a public university system in Ohio with universities that were 200 years old. So I do believe in the power of institutions that carry forward through crises and through, and through the changes in society that allow us to have the continuity, right? Jewish tradition is 4,000 years old, right? We have to remember that the essentials of what we're doing, I think are sound and need to be carried forward. We're the envy of the world in terms of ethnic and religious groups for our sustainability and continuity. Nevertheless, you only survive as an institution if you adapt and change. And so there's no question we're in that moment of adaptation and change. And I do want to associate myself with Andres's comments about lifting the bar of excellence, right? I mean, first of all, just notice the Zoom. This is a whole new high-tech improvement that you're using here, Shoham, for IAC.
It doesn't always work, but yeah.
I haven't been on this format yet. But you asked also what comes from the outside world, right? There's going to be new technologies, the improvements, the expectation of standards. We once had a speaker who spoke to us when we were at Hillel, the professionals, who said, our kids are the smartest kids. We've sent them to the best schools. We've had them apply for the best internships. We've sent them on the most amazing experiences. They could go on they listen to the best professors. What makes us think that we can dumb down Judaism and that they'll be attracted to it? So in a world of excellence, in a world of unlimited opportunities for our young people, in a world where they can connect to anything, anywhere, all the time, if we're competing for their sense of self and identity and their time and their eyeballs, I know my own kids, right? We have to be really, really good. And Jewish tradition historically has been. That's why we've survived. I mentioned some of our great contributions to experiential learning before, but there's going to be new ones, and we should find them in this slightly less than a tsunami. We should find them, and we should get behind them and support them as they go forward.
Paul, the fall is coming. How the day schools are going to look like in the fall? And do you think that Jewish day schools will ever go back to February 2020?
So the fall is something that schools are, of course, working incredibly hard to be ready. And they've got to be ready for many different scenarios. So scenario planning has really been at the core of it. Everybody wants to be in person, especially at the beginning of the school year. That's the point when students are building relationships with each other. Teachers are able to build relationships and get to know their students and what their students need. And this year, one of the reasons why we were able to carry on teaching and learning is because, of course, it happened after all of that was long established through the year. So the ideal is that everyone will be face-to-face come the beginning of the school year. Clearly, that's not going to be possible everywhere, but we'll all pray that it is possible in many places as possible. Then the school year is going to look varied. It's almost inevitable, I think, that at some point in the year we will be in person, and at other points in the year we'll be online. And even when we're in person, there are students and in some cases teachers who may not be able to be physically present for health reasons or other reasons. So what the schools are doing very creatively is thinking about the best way to manage those transitions, to be ready for the fact that we won't necessarily be able to predict when they're going to happen, to accommodate all of the critical educators and their needs, and to be able to meet the needs of every student, no matter what their learning styles are and their social and emotional needs look like. So it's a challenging year ahead, but what I see every day is educators who are thinking so deeply, and at a time in the summer when they might normally have been taking vacations, working incredibly hard to craft the best possible experience for every student and every member of faculty in the year ahead.
Amira, we all here in this conversation really believe in the connection between Israel and the Jewish people. And this is part of the reason that this summit is done with Tel Aviv University. The previous summit we did was with the Paris Center for Peace and Innovation. And if you look at one of the most important and incredible things that happened in the last few years in several decades in the Jewish world is the Israel Experience programs, right? Taglit, Masa, Momentum, others. And this connection to Israel, especially in the young generation, where they can fly to Israel through the program. So even spending this summer, usually many Israeli and Jewish American families are spending the time in Israel. How we make sure that we keep this connection to Israel, especially with the young generation, during this physical distancing and boundaries and restrictions on flights and so forth.
So I think that, ideally, we would have liked to be able to keep on bringing the tens of thousands that do come to experience Israel and, as we say, live it like a local in the many different opportunities there are. And actually, we're doing whatever we can to enable and continue that, even under very challenging circumstances and limitations. But at the same time, I think we do understand in the last couple of months that there's an opportunity here really to rethink what is an Israel experience and what are the ways by which you can concretize and bring Israel into the life of those who are not able to come, but may experience it differently, using all the technology opportunities, but also the journey. We always talk about the Israel experience being a journey where the individual is being transformed by the text they meet, by the physical sphere they meet and the different sites in Israel, but also by the people that they meet. And I think here lies the huge opportunity for us. How do we creatively make sure that we enable them to meet Israel and Israelis and the multifaceted of this amazing society with all that it comes with through the virtual space? And I would even say in some kind of a hybrid model. We're exploring today different mixes. What would it mean to come to Israel, but then spend a shorter period and then come back and continue your experience, whether it's an internship or study or volunteering from a distance, or the other way around, to start your journey while you're at home through the different meetings we can create via the virtual space, but then you come and you concretize it once you come to Israel. And we're playing with both. And also when you're in Israel, how can you create the experience to be one that mixes all those different abilities? So we think that Israel still has to continue to be a critical core part and at the heart of Jewish identity in general, and for the younger generation specifically. And so we're working to find what would be that kind of a balance between the physical and the virtual and the distance. But we believe it all would be based on relationships between the people that we must find a way to continue to do.
Andre, how do you make sure that the connection is there and we keep it strong.
Well, I think that there's something very unique about this crisis. Is I think the first crisis that hits Israel and the diaspora at the same time. Right? It hits the entire world, and depending on the day, it hits America more than Israel. And I think, of course, I gotta be tooting my own horn, as we say, but I think that philanthropy offers a bridge to strengthen that link during the pandemic and after. I think that one of the things that we saw is a number of GFN members from Israel decided to do a campaign to raise money. That was 3 months ago, to raise money for the Jewish community of the United States, because they were dealing with the virus more successfully than we were, and the communities were there. It wasn't a lot of money, but symbolically, it was very important. It was the first time that Israeli philanthropists sort of seek to invert the flow of funds, and so I think that again, the pandemic accelerates a process, right? We were in a process of having these two Jewish communities being more like equal, and I think that the pandemic is gonna hasten that too. There is a danger. We can't be too naive. The world is going isolationist. Politicians are being more isolationist, and people are going to be understandably more concerned about their immediate surrounding. The synagogue around the block that is closing, the JCC that had a fire, half of the local federation that has an emergency campaign. So there's going to be that tension, right? There's going to be that need to be more local. But I think that at the same time, the fact that we're going at the same time through the same crisis can be leveraged into creating more and new bridges. And last point I would say is the whole element of Israeli high-tech and science development in COVID and in creating more resilient and healthier communities can be another vector of connection.
Eric, if you don't mind, I have some questions from the audience.
Sure.
So one for you is, I chose you. The question is from the audience. You spoke a lot about collaboration, all of you, and I must say that the last 4 months for us, it was a blessing to really collaborate with so many Jewish organizations. How we make sure that we're not going back to the silos, to this working in each institution. I don't want to use the word competition, but really making sure that we maintain this wonderful collaboration that was taking place in the last 4 months for the future.
Well, look, I think that it's maybe less of a question than a challenge to us on this Zoom and beyond, which is I believe that what we've been doing in terms of collaboration in this pandemic is really what our communities wanted us to do all along. I think they've greeted it with relief. They've greeted it with positivity, and I hope it will continue to be reinforced. As the head of the Jewish Federations, I can tell you I'm proud of how we've helped to pull together a wide range of the organizations that are working day to day in the Jewish communities, including my friends Paul and Jeremy on this call. Of course, as Andres mentioned, and all of us collaborate with Philanthropy together, federations and foundations working together. So I think we've seen the benefit of it. We're not going to go back, but I'll tell you that I take the question as a personal challenge and responsibility on behalf of the Jewish Federation system, which after all stands for nothing more than building flourishing Jewish communities in each and every community. We have 146 federations, 300 other network communities. In each of those communities, we have a responsibility to make sure that the entire Jewish world is working together, and we take that as a challenge and a solemn obligation.
Paul, another question from the audience. I think that you're the proper person to answer. Is the shortage in teachers? Do you see any reason to worry about shortage in teachers, with Hebrew teachers, Jewish teachers at school for various reasons? And do you think there are innovative ways to close this gap or potential challenge?
We're certainly concerned about the shortage of teachers. There's a shortage of quality teachers in education generally, and we have particular issues in teaching Ivrit and teaching Judaics, as well as other subjects, where I think there are really two areas for us to focus on. The first is having seen how incredible educators are every day, and now even more so, I think, parents and families and students appreciate the incredible work that their educators have done through this crisis. I hope we can help people understand the value of a career in education and why it is that more people should be choosing it. That is one area that I think is important. And the second, of course, is as we get more skilled in blended learning and online learning, it opens up a whole set of opportunities for different kinds of collaboration. Exactly as Amira was talking about, the relationship between experiences in Israel and experiences here in North America. As we get better at using the technology, we can bring more educators from Israel, for example, into people's homes, into the classroom, wherever they are, and also address the fact that the shortage of educators is most acute in smaller communities across the country. That's where they have the most challenges. So I think there's a lot of opportunity as we get better and better in building the relationships that you want between educators and students and doing it using these online tools.
Mira, one other question from the audience is, where do you see us dealing with education related to the wave of anti-Semitism that we feel is happening in the United States? You see that this is something that should be on the agenda moving forward.
So I would say we're definitely very concerned, even before the pandemic and also during the pandemic, about the rise in anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiments. We see it coming from different directions: extreme right, extreme left, extreme Islam, etc. I think in terms of our organizations, there are kind of two aspects with regard to our educational work. The first is, how do we create a safe space for the Jewish population, Jewish students, Jewish high school students, university students, whereby they have an ability to get more knowledge, get a deeper understanding of the facts and the situation and the narrative, not in a judgmental way, but in a way that enables them to feel proud and be able to identify with themselves being Jews and part of the Jewish people. And at the same time, understand that they're part of a network. They're not alone there. And so if they're faced with any of those attacks or any of those attempts in the universities or wherever, they feel confident enough to be out there as proud Jews. The other is, of course, in a more proactive way, to the extent that there are any BDS attempts or anti-Semitism attacks, clearly, then being there, working with the leadership of organizations, whether it's the universities or JFNA or other organizations or multinational in the extent that we work, really making sure that combating anti-Semitism and adopting the wider definitions and being committed to education of the Holocaust and the history of the Jewish people is something that we try to do more in our leadership work, kind of a more diplomatic way. So those are kind of two angles that we look into. That's aside, of course, of being out there as a global platform to support and make sure Jews are safe, mostly outside of North America. North America are lucky enough and privileged to have their own systems, SCAN, JFNA, etc., ADL, but outside of North America, the more smaller and weaker communities, this is where we play a more concrete active role actually in providing physical means and security services, etc. But on the ground of education, it's mostly working with the Jewish population, making sure they have safe space to be proud, to be identified as Jews and get the strength together to be out there actively protesting and stopping those attempts.
Andrew, another question from the audience is the connection between the industry, the corporate world, and the Jewish world. We're trying to do that, and we're doing it in Neitanim, for example, bringing mentors to the teenagers. We've seen several corporates that during this crisis in America were providing nonprofits with all kind of tools and so forth. But where us in the Jewish world can really leverage more the industry and for that matter, it's also Jewish Americans that are part of the corporate world in enriching what we're doing.
So I think that there's a breaking down of silos that you were talking before, and Eric was talking before, between organizations. But there's also a breaking of silos between sectors. When I started my work in the philanthropic world, it was the Torah was that the sectors don't mix. The philanthropic sector does its work, the government sector does its work, the corporate sector does its work, and it's good practice not to mix them. Today is the other way around. Today we see more and more partnerships between the private sector, the corporate sector, the government sector, and the philanthropic sector. And I think that the future will look pretty much like a mix of all these things, especially in relation to Israel, where the link is today a lot through things like impact investing, through ecosystem. Like you take an issue, for example, an issue that we worked on a lot, the issue of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math in Israel. And the approach to that was philanthropy, the private sector that needed to provide the jobs and the tools, and the government that needed to take things to scale. So I think that we're going to be entering a very interesting phase in philanthropy. And the question for the Jewish community is how do we make use of that? In the case of Israel, it's easier because because you operate at country level, so corporations play a role and the government plays a role. In the case of the Jewish community, it's a little different. But there are things that we can do by involving the corporate sector and the government sector in our work. And I think that can be, if we learn how to do that well, we're going to be opening a lot of good opportunities for the future.
So we have the final question that is, thank you, Andrea, the final question that we asked all the panelists in the last day and a half. And by the way, when you're done giving your answer, we're going to show a short clip of all the answers throughout the last day and a half. So the question was, what will profoundly change in the future of education and learning in years to come? What is the one thing? It's a short answer. What is going to change? You could talk about the Jewish world or beyond. Who wants to be first?
I'll try. I spoke earlier about the blurring of relationships. I think it's the breaking down of barriers of geography, boundaries. I think that's the big change here, this blurring and coming together in a collaborative fashion.
Eric?
So I'm going to end on an optimistic note because I'm the one that has been talking about getting us back together in person. But I will say that the one thing about the use of online and technology is we've learned that we shouldn't leave anybody out, that we can reach everybody with quality, excellent programming. And so we will never again settle for only those who show up.
Thank you. Paul?
There are, of course, many different things that I hope will change. What really stands out for me is that I hope we'll change the way that we in our community value what a school is, what a Jewish day school is, and what Jewish education amounts to. That we will no longer be in that sort of traditional conversation purely about academic achievement, grades, getting into the best college, as if that's the only thing that matters in an education, and that we recognize that school really is a key place for whole child development. Of course, academics matter, but in the fundamental value proposition of a school, and the fundamental value proposition especially of a Jewish day school, it's so much more in the creativity of learning, of meeting the needs of all our diverse learners, of building values and the centrality of Judaism in our lives, of building, as we started this conversation, community, and building socially and mentally strong young people, as Manette Mayberg said earlier on, building strong future generations. We've seen it through COVID, and I'm optimistic that we really will recognize this holistic view of what a Jewish day school and what school is about as we move beyond crisis and into a new normal.
Amira?
I think the major thing is that we cannot afford to give up on being very, committed to connecting and staying together, regardless. Whatever pandemic would come and go, any limitations that would be there. This is our journey. Thousands of years in the past, thousands of years into the future, we must stay together and we must find those alternative ways. And I would just, wish for us when you talk about education transformation, you talk about, what happens between the student and the educator, the content and the medium. Those are kind of defining what happens there as an education transformation. And I would wish for us to kind of be open and imagine all of these becoming different. So who's the educator? Probably many, many, many opportunities. Who would be the educator? What would be the medium? Probably many, many multiple mediums that could be there. What would be the content? Probably very diversified. So not giving up on and insisting on keeping on staying together and connecting while being open to push the boundaries of who's the educator, what's the medium, what's the content.
So,
Andre.
I agree with my colleagues. I would just say two things. I think that it's a hope and a wish. I think that in the pandemic, many of the things that used to worry us in the past now look so, in the best cases, they look quaint. And in the worst cases, they look stupid. Like we worried about so much nonsense, when every brush with death, every major jolt to your life makes you rethink your priorities. So I hope, we come out of this. I mean, this is my personal quest, right? But I think it's good for us as a community that we come out of this crisis with an understanding of what's really important and what's really urgent, and to sort of clean up all the things that worry us on a regular, in regular times, and focused on what's really important, which is what my colleague said, from not dumbing down Judaism, as Eric said, to training full human beings, like Paul said. All the things will be possible if this pandemic helps us focus on what's really important and what really matters in life. Let's not forget that in history, after every pandemic, there's the big Renaissance. Actually, after the Black Death in the Middle Ages, we had the Renaissance. So let's focus on the Renaissance and let's make it count.
Wow, that was really awesome. Thank you so much, all of you. And let's watch what Adar has to say about that, and let's hope that we meet soon face to face. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shoam.
Thank you for having us.
Moving a university is like moving a cemetery. You cannot expect any help from the inhabitants. Great value, and I think we will continue to see tremendous growth along those lines.
I think the focus in general in learning is gonna shift from specific knowledge to learning how to learn.
And take advantage of all of the things we know about engagement with gaming and apply that more to learning and understanding students.
Education is what people should focus on right now, because at the end of this, this is something that you can do now and come out of it stronger at the other end.
Culture enabler of teaching students how to learn. So they're gonna become mentors, walking the students through the learning process.
I think we'll be moving into an integration of synchronous and asynchronous learning, whether it's online or not.
It's really getting them comfortable. It's really providing the proper explanation about why this tool is so unique and so impactful and can really change people's lives.
I think most universities won't change, but the big change will be that some will.
The big thing that's going to hit us is a major demographic shift in the country. Probably won't have a huge impact on elite universities other than to make them even more impossibly elite than they already are.
We'll have much more multidisciplinary studies in order to equip students with tools for an uncertain world.
We have to uplift the positions of the teachers. We have to talk about excellency, meaning not to compromise about the quality, the diversity, the inclusion.
With new certificates of relevance to the various professions that will be as highly regarded and highly coveted and meaningful.
Hi, everybody. I hope you have enjoyed this one-of-a-kind e-summit. What an amazing couple of days. We are about to keep the discussion going and would love for you to join us in one of the 8 facilitated breakout sessions our incredible partners are leading, starting in a few minutes at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The topics are rich and diverse, and you are guaranteed to be inspired. Registration is quick and easy via the Summit app. Just go to the Breakout Sessions tab and reserve your spot. Prisma will lead a session for everyone involved with Jewish Day Schools. Kesher Le'Ivrit will lead a session in Hebrew for Hebrew teachers and principals. The Foundation for Jewish Camp will lead a session for all camp leaders and enthusiasts. The Jewish Federations of North America would love to see all Federation professionals and lay leaders at their session today. Jewish Founders Network is looking forward to their discussion with all trustees, funders, and foundation professionals among you today. Join youth movement leaders to learn how they reinvented themselves in the face of a world crisis while using innovative thinking. If you are an Israel educator, join the discussion to hear and learn from our partners at the Center of Israel Education and the Jewish Agency for Israel. Momentum have prepared a special session to learn how do we preserve thousands of years of Jewish relational teaching. Don't miss this opportunity to dive deeper into the world of Jewish education. Register now at the Summit app, as we will start these sessions momentarily. Thank you.